Chapter 1042. Do you mean that the world is round? Tong Lan looked at him in surprise. She didn't expect him to react so quickly. The world was round, which contradicted most people's understanding. How is that possible? How can the world be round? Many people subconsciously refuted, even though the person in front of them was their dean, saying that the world was round was too sensational. That's right, the world is a ball. Tong Lan shrugged her shoulders. Then she looked at the other students contemptuously and said, "He is much smarter than all of you." His words made everyone choke to death. They wanted to scold him, but he was the dean of the academy. However, they couldn't agree with the conclusion that the world was round, not to mention that it was a ball. If it's a ball, why didn't we fall when we were standing on it? Someone questioned immediately. This ball has gravity. As mentioned just now, gravity is everywhere as one of the fundamental forces of this world. However, the greater the mass of an object, the greater the gravity. One of the fundamental forces of the world? What do you mean? Gravity, electromagnetic force, weak interaction force, strong interaction force. Of course, you won't understand even if I explain. Tong Lan snorted softly. She hated doing useless things. She didn't like the people of the Yin nation either. However, she also didn't like being questioned. Everyone thought that it would be thunder and lightning or time, but they couldn't understand the words that Tong Lan said at all. They only knew about gravity after Tong Lan explained it to them just now. "Dean, why did you say that the world is round?" Ma Huolong asked Ning Changqing respectfully. He really respected Ning Changqing. He was rejected by the Wangjing Academy back then, and was filled with grief and indignation. If Ning Changqing hadn't accepted him into the Xiaojiang Academy, he didn't know what would have happened to him. He only knew that he was indebted to the dean. Ning Changqing stroked his beard and said, "Someone had such a guess, or rather, many people had such a guess." He had always been non-committal about this guess and treated it as a joke. When he heard Tong Lan mention the mast and the dim moon, he immediately thought of it. There are still smart people, but unfortunately they aren't you. Tong Lan really didn't have a good expression on her face. She was as cold as ice and her words were always sarcastic, which made everyone extremely angry. When a ship goes out to sea, the last thing to disappear is the mast. When a ship returns, the first thing to appear is the mast. This proves one thing. The surface of the sea looks flat, but it is actually curved. It was the same for the red and yellow moons. When the dim moon appeared, the red moon blocked a part of the yellow moon. But what was the difference between the yellow moon and the one he usually saw? Not at all. This is because after the sun sets, it will be on the other side of this world. The world will block a portion of the sunlight, so there will be a crescent moon. That's impossible. The dim moon is because the yellow moon's radiance was blocked by the red moon. Someone immediately refuted. Tong Lan seemed to be amused by these words. The ice and snow melted away, leaving a wide smile on her face. Yellow moon radiance? You probably don't even know what the moon is, do you? And how do you explain the curve of the sea? Although the crowd found it hard to answer, someone immediately shouted, "In the end, it's all just a guess. You don't have any concrete evidence, so you just treat it as a theory. No matter what, I don't believe that the world is round." Tong Lan frowned slightly. This bunch of stubborn fellows. How can the students of the Xiaojiang Academy be so unreasonable? You don't have enough evidence. Just the curve of the sea can't explain everything. Chao Gui couldn't help but take a step forward. No matter what, he couldn't accept the other party belittling the academy. However, after he finished speaking, he turned to look at the crowd and said, "Let Miss Tong finish speaking. Where have all the years of studying gone?" Tong Lan rubbed her brows and said, "Like I said before, you don't know what the moon is. Do you think the moon can emit light? In fact, the moon is just a huge stone ball. Can a stone emit light? In the dark, if a stone is placed on the ground, can you see it? You can only see it when there is light. As for the specific reason, it involves the principle of light. However, if you think about it, you will understand. If the moon can't emit light, then the sun is on the other side of the world. Part of the light is blocked by the world, while the other part shines on the red and yellow moons. That's why you see the crescent moon. It's precisely because the world is round that you can see the crescent moon. Even so, maybe the world is like a plate and can't be considered round. Therefore, there is also the curve of the sea and the curve of the Earth's surface. Adding these 2 points can prove some things. Tong Lan explained frantically. Meanwhile, Shi Yu and the rest of the people from the Jitai Academy had also arrived. What are you guys discussing? Shi Yu asked curiously. Telling them that the world is a ball. Tong Lan looked depressed. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have said so much. In the end, so many things were involved. The world is round? These words caused many girls from the Jitai Academy to exclaim in surprise. Shi Yu saw Tong Lan's embarrassed look, and found it a little funny. Ignoring the people from the Jitai Academy, he said to Tong Lan, "Can't you just let them see the curve of the earth with their own eyes? In the sky? They can see the curve of the earth." The 2 academy students were immediately attracted by this sentence. You mean they can go to the sky? How do they go up? What does the sky look like? Let me help you ask. Borrow Old Lee's hot air balloon, and he can take you to the sky. Shi Yu smiled at everyone. That's his lifeblood. Tong Lan snorted. He's not that stingy. Also, don't forget that we are researching airplanes. That kind of hot air balloon has already been eliminated. Shi Yu patted Tong Lan's arm and said. At the side, the people from the Xiaojiang Academy were still telling the people from the Jitai Academy about the world is a ball matter. After all, there were many girls from the Jitai Academy, and they all had an intellectual aura about them. This inevitably made the students from the other academies a little enthusiastic. Shi Yu turned his head to take a look, stood beside Tong Lan, and said, I heard that there will be a lecture in the next few days. All the academies will send people to give lectures. Yagüe didn't say anything to us, but we can talk about the world being round. I'm afraid those people will explode again. Tong Lan snorted. She already found it troublesome to deal with a few dozen people, let alone a few hundred. Do you think they won't tell the students from the other academies when they return? Shi Yu laughed. Although he wasn't as exquisite as Tong Lan, he was still superior. There were no ugly girls in the aboriginals. When the people on the other side were almost done and finally quietened down, Tong Lan said expressionlessly, Go back and ask if you can take a look at the sky. There's no point talking about this topic now. Today's tour isn't over yet. Let's go. Other than the academies, there were various laboratories and workshops. These laboratories were different from the chemistry laboratories that were used to teach students about chemical reactions. The laboratories at the back were all places where new technology was being developed. Although the most advanced technology was in the laboratory on Mount Termination, where there were hundreds of scholars and dozens of sword masters that Rinpochian had kidnapped from Earth, the things that the laboratories in the academy were researching weren't simple either. For example, airplanes. The progress of airplanes in Mount Termination, including the engine and other technical reserves, as well as the overall design of airplanes, had roughly reached the level of World War II. However, the students in the academy were also researching their own airplanes. Of course, the engine blueprints were provided by the laboratory on Mount Termination. Even so, the things that these students accomplished were enough to put most people to shame. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. Chapter 1043. The current Black Bamboo Academy was no longer as shabby as it used to be. Over the past 7 or 8 years, it had expanded almost every year, and its area had expanded by more than 10 times. The artificial lake in the backyard had long become the front yard. The Black Bamboo Forest, which gave the academy its name, had now become a part of the academy's scenery. After passing the artificial lake, there was a piece of flat land, followed by many classrooms, and then the Black Bamboo Forest. After passing through the artificial lake, there were workshops for blacksmiths, carpenters, pottery, and a small glass workshop. Although there were only 4 workshops, the area was very large, much larger than the previous classrooms and the artificial lake. The students of other academies had never built workshops in the academy. After all, these industries had nothing to do with the academy. However, this was the specialty of the Black Bamboo Academy. The students were responsible for designing, thinking, and even assembling. while the craftsmen were responsible for turning some of their ideas into reality. Nowadays, there weren't many students here, but the workshops weren't idle either. Clanging sounds were nonstop, sparks were flying in the blacksmith workshop, and sawdust was flying in the carpenter workshop. We have an idea for these workshops. After designing the blueprints and measurements, we will hand them over to them to make the actual products. Sometimes they can't understand, so we have to help them make the products on the spot. Tonglan pointed at the workshops on both sides as she walked quickly. Although she didn't want to pay attention to the students, they didn't let her off and kept asking questions along the way. Ning Chongqing, in particular, was extremely interested in the courses in the academy even though he didn't comment on it. He discovered a problem. The things in the Black Bamboo Academy were completely different from the other academies. The students of the other academies only had to study, but the students of the Black Bamboo Academy had to do many other things besides studying. You will know in a while. Tonglan was too lazy to explain further. She brought everyone to the experimental area. Everyone looked up and saw a row of brick buildings that were similar to the classrooms in front of them. On both sides, there were several huge storehouses. They didn't look special from the outside. "This is the laboratory," Tonglan said as they walked. Everyone immediately knew that this was the main point. What are they doing here? Experimenting and designing some new things. Tonglan led everyone past the laboratories and saw that they were full of cabinets and tables, and there were many papers scattered on them. "Can I take a look?" Ning Chongqing asked. "You can only look and not touch. Don't mess up the things inside," Tonglan said expressionlessly. Ning Chongqing nodded, walked in, and went straight to the stack of papers scattered on the table. He saw that they were all blueprints of unknown objects, and they were all labeled with detailed sizes. However, he did see a few relatively complete designs, or rather, imaginative designs. There was a complete picture on it. The objects in the picture had the body of a flying insect or a bird, and there were words that he could not understand next to them. Lifting his head and looking around, he saw huge shelves filled with dossiers. On the table by the window, there were a few wooden models, which were the items on the scrolls. "What is this?" Tonglan crossed her arms and leaned against the door. She looked at everyone walking around and replied expressionlessly, "A plane with a passenger. It can carry people? Fly into the sky." Ning Chongqing was extremely interested. No matter which world you are in, flying freely in the sky is one of the dreams of mankind. "Of course. Where is it? Have you made it?" "I'm very surprised. The things in your academy have really broadened my horizons." The old man smiled and praised them. If it was someone else who said that they could fly into the sky, he might not believe it. However, in this academy led by Zhao Prince Consort, it might become a reality. After all, they could make calls from thousands of miles away. There was even a telephone in the Shaojiang Academy, which was installed by a graduate of the academy. "It's in the warehouse," Tonglan said casually. "It's not difficult to fly into the sky." The others were speechless. What a big tone. Furthermore, why was the Black Bamboo Academy doing things that seemed like a fantasy to others? What was the world like a ball? What was a plane that could carry people into the sky? For this world, the Black Bamboo Academy was way ahead of its time. Therefore, when people learned about the Ancient Race Academy, they did not feel respect. Instead, they felt suspicious and strange. One step ahead was a great man with great foresight, while 2 steps ahead was a lunatic who raved. The Black Bamboo Academy, which was at the forefront of this world, was obviously that lunatic. When they passed by the 3rd classroom, Tonglan saw a box with a wire attached to it. She rolled her eyes, and her face finally showed some expression. The corners of her mouth curled up, as if she had thought of something fun. "Do you want me to take a photo for you?" "Photo?" Everyone was puzzled. Tonglan took out a stack of hard and smooth paper from a table, and showed it to everyone. "This is it." Everyone saw that there were pictures on the paper. There were trees, houses, purple bamboo forests, and a small lake. Almost all the scenes that they had seen in the academy appeared on the paper. Moreover, unlike paintings, the images on the paper seemed to contain scenes from reality. Other than the color being black and white, it was almost the same as reality. "What is this?" Everyone was surprised. Photo paper, or rather photo paper, can record everything in reality. It won't change even after 10 or 100 years. Tonglan tried her best to look serious, but her expression was slightly strange. Anyone who was familiar with her would immediately know that she was up to no good. Although she was always very arrogant, Tonglan was also an 18-year-old girl. She was lively and quick-witted, but only people who were familiar with her would see this side of her. What are these? Thank you. Ning Chongqing stroked his beard and smiled. He really wanted to see what he would look like in the so-called photo. Okay, stand properly. I'll get ready. Tonglan took out the box. She pointed the camera at everyone and connected it to the wires. She looked up at everyone who had stood properly according to her instructions and pressed the shutter. Click. After taking 3 photos in a row, Tonglan nodded in satisfaction. Done. She then took out a photo from behind her. On it was a picture of a student from the academy with 6 arms. He looked very lifelike. This will be the effect after the image is taken. Everyone exclaimed. It's just like the real thing. Of course it's real. His soul has been captured in here. As long as this photo is torn, he will die. Tonglan finally revealed her fangs. She had an undisguised smile on her face, as if she had finally succeeded. It was exactly the same as the negative characters in the comics. She had learned it from them. In an instant, everyone was stunned. They felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over their heads. Your thoughts? Many of the Academy's scholars were stunned for a moment before their expressions changed drastically. That's right. Why do you think this thing is the same as the real thing? Because it's the real thing. After this soul-capturing camera takes a photo, your soul will be captured in it. Tonglan felt very carefree when she saw everyone's expression turn into one of horror. In the future, if Yagüe asks you to go west, you can't go east. If he asks you to catch a dog, you can't catch a chicken. Otherwise, as long as the photo is torn, your soul will fly away and scatter. Who is Yagüe? Zhao Prince Consort. He is an evil spirit in human skin. Otherwise, why do you think we always talk about Yagüe? This time, everyone was even more frightened. Demoness. Why did you do such a thing? Many people's faces turned green. Tonglan felt that she should find a place to laugh again. She laughed heartily in her heart. Idiots. However, there were a few people who didn't have much of a change in their expressions. Ning Chongqing even laughed. This young lady was rather interesting. He didn't believe that the soul would be captured on the photo. Humans had souls. Did those trees and stones have souls as well? Furthermore, if that was the case, why did she say it now? Did she trick them here just to take a photo? Why go through so much trouble? Tonglan's thoughts turned extremely fast. Do you think that trees and stones don't have souls? Everything in the world has souls. As Tonglan spoke, the photo was an image of a wall. Tonglan tore the photo a little and revealed a strange smile to everyone. As long as I tear the photo. Everyone stared intently at her hands. Many of them broke out in cold sweat. Boom. Suddenly, a loud sound erupted nearby. Gravel flew everywhere. Although it wasn't far away, it was separated by a courtyard. Tonglan was also startled by this loud sound. Her hands trembled and she tore the photo. She immediately identified that it was most likely an explosion in the university's laboratory. However, she almost couldn't hold back her laughter. She was too cooperative. Everyone looked at the torn photo in her hands, and then at the thick smoke not far away. Their faces turned completely green. Even the faces of Chao Gui and the others changed. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Chapter 1044. Ning Chongqing looked at Tonglan's carefree smile and couldn't help but laugh. Little friend, don't scare them. If there really was such a treasure, how could it be here? How could these photos be placed so casually? As long as the students were given some time, they would be able to understand. However, the shock of seeing such a realistic photo, coupled with the series of things they had seen before, made everyone subconsciously believe the other party's words. Although everyone was doubtful that this world was a ball, they were still very surprised by the things they saw. There were also those completely different words in the library. This made the Black Bamboo Academy somewhat unfathomable in the eyes of others. While Tonglan was tearing the paper, some idiot happened to detonate the laboratory and gave everyone a huge shock. It could only be said that it was too coincidental. Tonglan didn't want to go overboard. She was just venting her anger at being questioned by everyone. Now that she was done scaring them, she stopped smiling and snorted when the other party pointed it out. I was just teasing you guys. I said you guys are stupid, but you still don't want to admit it. You're going too far. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief at first, but then they were infuriated by her words. Let's go and take a look at the things in the warehouse. I have completed my mission. Tonglan put her hands behind her back again and felt a little bored. What was that just now? The old man asked with a smile. A camera, a small object that records images through optical imaging. Yagüe casually mentioned that they had made it out of boredom. It was too bulky and not easy to use. I heard that it could be made into a small one, but Yagüe said that there's no market for it now, and we don't have that much time to make it, so we left it there for now. That's right, this camera was made by a few students when they had nothing to do. After all, there were theories about optical imaging in physics books. Some students had taken the time to study it and had come up with a few. As for the market, although there was one, it was not big. The most important thing was that they didn't have enough manpower right now. Now the students didn't even have time to rest just by studying and researching. Moreover, the camera involved many aspects. Just the reduction of the volume and the color film alone would take the students a long time. How could they waste their manpower on such a product? At present, Renbachian's main focus was still on technological products that could bring about great changes in society. The most important thing now was not the camera, nor was it the airplane. In fact, it was another technology that was closely related to the camera. Sound movies. Through the combination of a sound film and a phonograph, Renbachian could do something big. Universal education. That's right, Renbachian's idea was to use video screens and phonographs to popularize education. As long as the instructional movie was recorded in advance, a group of people would be sent to play it in each city every night. Although it couldn't nurture any talents, it could allow some adults to learn how to read. Being literate meant being able to read newspapers and magazines, and there were other possibilities. This method of fishing with a net was also the most cost-effective method at present. The world is changing very quickly now. In 10 or 20 years, the world will be completely different from what it was thousands of years ago. If they could not keep up with this change, they would be eliminated and reduced to the bottom of society. However, ordinary aboriginals, the Jing tribe, and the people of the Yun nation didn't have the conditions to learn. They had to hunt, work, and survive. We also don't have the spare energy to let ordinary people put down their livelihood to learn things that can't fill their stomachs, and can only focus on the future. However, the imperial court should still give them a chance. As for whether they could grasp it or not, it was up to them. I think there will always be some people who can grasp it, and we have changed the fate of some people. Renbachian once said this to the Empress. Renbachian had already asked the laboratory at Mount Zhongshu to carry out this matter. After all, the people there knew what he wanted. The requirements for the equipment weren't high, and the laboratory's standards could completely produce it. As for reducing the size of the video cameras and cameras, this wasn't something that needed to be done at the moment. Therefore, the research on cameras by some students at the academy had been put aside by Renbachian. Currently, the academy was conducting research on the theory and some technical reserves of airplanes. The reason why airships weren't developed was that there were too many ferocious beasts in the sky. It would be better if they were airplanes since they were flexible and mobile. If a clumsy airship that was full of goods and people appeared in the sky, it would probably be destroyed by the ferocious beasts in less than half a day. This is an internal combustion engine from the first to the fourth generation. There are also different models, such as tractors and trucks. This is a steam engine that ranges from trains to mines. These are some things on airplanes that you don't need to know. Tonglan opened the warehouses one by one and showed everyone around. From time to time, she had to stop and wait for those people. Although they weren't happy with Tonglan's attitude, everyone was still very interested in the things in the warehouses. Did you guys make those things? Someone asked curiously. If this was the case, then the students of the Black Bamboo Academy were really impressive. However, they seemed to be more suitable as craftsmen. Steam engines and steam trains are, but tractors and trucks aren't. At most, we only made some assistance. Tonglan walked out of the last warehouse and twisted her body. All the joints in her body made a sound as if her body was exploding from top to bottom. This was a small movement of Tonglan's body, just like a normal person stretching. Little friend, I'm very interested in the physics that you talked about. Can you talk more about it? Ning Chongqing asked gently. Tonglan immediately felt that this old man was really annoying. At night, a few students from the academy were communicating together. When they talked about the demons and monsters they saw during the day, someone was immediately astonished. Why did I hear that they came to this world from another world? I was also very curious about whether there were really other worlds. However, when I saw those words later, I believed it. Weren't they captured from the other side of the mountain? I heard that there are many such strange human-like beings after crossing the mountain to the west. Why did I hear that they were robots? Didn't they fall from the sky? Then they were captured to give lectures? The students from the academy looked at each other blankly. Where did those strange creatures come from? Go and ask the others. After asking around, everyone was even more at a loss. More than 20 academies had heard more than 20 stories of different origins. This bunch of fellows is full of lies. Someone scolded through gritted teeth. At this point, only fools would not realize that they had been cheated. Who said that the aboriginals were all straightforward? The next time they saw them, they would break their legs. A bunch of liars. Then another question arose. Where did those strange creatures come from? Just like on Earth, when one saw a person with 6 arms and 2 faces, one would be curious about where they came from. Then, one would use one's imagination. It was the same for these students from the Yun Nation. First, set a small goal, for example, 1 second. Chapter 1045. I wish everyone a happy new year. May we grow old together and live happily ever after. Wrong, we are all a bunch of single dogs. Happy New Year instead. Academic progress. Abundant financial resources. Good health. Everything goes according to plan. The pretty boy of the Empress's family. Happy New Year currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1046. In the valley there was a waterfall flowing down. Not far away, there were 3 thatched cottages, and one of them was occupied by a man and a woman. The man had thick eyebrows and big eyes. Although he was wearing coarse clothes, he was full of heroic spirit. The woman had a graceful figure and a beautiful appearance. Her hands were sewing and patching. From time to time, she would raise her head to look at the man who was doing carpentry work not far away. Her eyes were filled with gentleness. A loud and clear eagle cry rang out from the sky, causing the 2 people below to stop what they were doing. Ro Air, get ready. We have guests. The man laughed loudly. The woman, who was called Ro Air, was just like her name. Every move she made was filled with gentleness. She gave off the feeling that she was a delicate flower that needed to be taken care of. Hearing these words, he first looked at the entrance of the valley, only to see a figure stepping on the branches of the trees, moving up and down as he approached. After taking a look, he turned around to boil water. Brother Fonga. Sister-in-law. The newcomer was a thin man wearing a fur coat. He somersaulted a few times in the air and landed in front of the thatched hut. He greeted the 2 of them. So it's Brother Yang. It must have been a cold journey. The valiant man was called Yifonga. His name was free and easy, and so was his personality. Elder brother's place is still the best. It's snowing heavily outside, and this place is like spring all year round. The mountain path is also difficult, and there are no outsiders to disturb us. The person who came flung his fur coat to the side and sighed in admiration. If you like it, then stay for a few more days. We can drink and chat merrily. Yifonga laughed heartily. The newcomer also laughed, but there was a hint of malice in his laughter. Yifonga immediately sensed the hidden meaning in his expression. The smile on his face didn't fade as he asked, "What happened? Do you have tea? I really miss the taste of your two tea trees." "It's still burning," the woman said with a smile from nearby. "Have a seat first." Yifanga invited him to sit down. A moment later, the tea was served. The newcomer calmly drank a cup of tea, and was about to speak when the woman beat him to it and said, "It was not easy for the two of us to leave that Jianghu. You know how we feel. We don't want to go back." This sentence set the tone. If anyone came to see his elder brother, he would welcome them. You are also welcome to stay for a few days. However, if there was something that would implicate the two of them, then there was no need to say anything. The newcomer smiled bitterly. "I'm here to warn you." Their expressions immediately turned serious. In the past few years, there have been endless disturbances outside, and it's getting more and more intense. Now it seemed that the experts on the list were unavoidable. Even though my brother and sister-in-law have retired from Jianghu, they are still on the list. Someone is looking for the two of you, the person said slowly. What happened? A few years ago, an organization appeared in Jianghu. It's called Going Home, the man said. Over the years, we've been gathering experts from all over the place, either through threats or promises. We've managed to recruit most of the top experts. Who could do such a thing? Yifanga's expression changed slightly. It should be known that none of the experts on the ranking list were easy to get along with. Yet someone had managed to recruit most of the experts? It was terrifying. As far as I know, Li Yuanzhu, Ma Hongyu, Su Gongso, Lin Dong and the others are among them. Yifanga could no longer maintain his composure, and revealed a shocked expression. One had to know that these people were the top experts in the world. Yet they were all in the same organization. When did this happen? What are they trying to do? About 6 years ago, not long after my brother retired, Li Yuanzhu chased after Su Xianxian. Su Xianxian died and Luohua sect was exterminated. The Tianmen sect, which had been entangled with Blood River Demon for decades, was also destroyed. Other than Blood River Demon, Zhao Zhaozhao and Murong Qing were also involved. Now 60 to 70% of the world's experts have joined that organization. As the person spoke, Yifanga and Shanrou's expressions became more and more surprised. They have been investigating the whereabouts of those unknown experts, including my brother and sister-in-law. When I heard this news, I hurried over to inform you. Even though not many people know where my brother is living in seclusion, it's not impossible to find him. It's better to plan ahead. The person thought for a while and simply said, "It's best to go to a place that even I don't know about." Hearing this, Shanrou's expression relaxed slightly. Yifanga's face also showed gratitude. "Brother Yang, did they not find you?" Shanrou asked. "Of course they found them. Fortunately, a few good friends were there, and helped me to force them to retreat. The sect master of Huabing Sword Tower, Jiang Zixi, also contacted some experts. Now that I've attracted a lot of their attention, I found an opportunity to remind the two of you. After leaving this place, I want to go to Huabing Sword Tower." Jiang Zixi was the sect master of Huabing Sword Tower. His nickname was Double Ringed, also known as Double Ringed Sword. He was an expert second only to Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao. Therefore, with a single call, he gathered a large group of experts at Huabing Sword Tower. What do they want to do? There is a rumor in Jianghu that the human race was not originally here, but was stranded here after a war with the foreign tribes. Their goal, like their name, is to return home. Yifanga and Shanrou immediately understood. Regardless of whether this was true or not, even if it was true, not everyone would be willing to be involved in this matter. They vainly tried to recruit the world's experts, and were either friends or enemies. Using threats and promises, they naturally incurred public anger. How many of the world's famous experts were willing to follow the lead of others? As a result, the experts who were unwilling to join the group responded to Jiang Zixi's call, forming another major force. Shanrou thought for a moment. She knew that this person did not simply tell the two of them to hide. He probably came with the intention of persuading the two of them to leave the mountain. However, she had made her stance clear from the beginning. As long as she did not relent, the other party would not mention this matter again. Thinking of this, Shanro smiled at the person who came. Thank you, Brother Yang, for informing us of this matter. The two of us will have to discuss this. If it doesn't work out, we will find an island outside the East Sea to live in seclusion. It's no different from this place. That's also good. The person who came let out a long sigh. Although Jiang Zixi's strength was far from that of return home, he wanted to persuade every expert as much as possible. However, Yi Fengge and his wife had done him a great favor. He could not open his mouth. Before he came, he had thought it through. If the other party did not want to return to Jianghu, then he wished that they could live in seclusion and not be found by others. At this moment, 3 eagle cries came from the sky. Yi Fengge and Shanro's expressions changed. Looking up, they saw a figure stepping on the tip of a tree and arriving before them. The person who came was wearing a purple Taoist robe. She had a black crown on her head and 5 cloud-like shoes on her feet. Her eyebrows were like crescent moons and her skin was fair. She had an otherworldly aura and looked like a fairy that had descended from the heavens. Jinshan King Yi Fengge, Water Envoy Shanro, and Lord Jinru Yanggan. This poor Taoist Li Yuanzhu greets you. The 3 people's expressions changed drastically. How did you know about this place? Thank you, Lord Jinru, for leading the way. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. Yanggan's expression turned ashen. Jingyang Street Imperial Bakery. A figure jumped out of the bakery. Bystanders could only see a faint shadow before the figure disappeared. A young girl slowly walked out of the bakery with an inexplicable smile on her face. Fiddling with a remote control in her hand, she pressed a button. Boom. The bag in the hands of the fleeing figure in the distance suddenly exploded. Lin Xiaola's eyes were squinting from her smile, but she was alarmed at the moment of the explosion. She let go of the bag and grabbed the air with both hands. Then, she stood there in a daze, looking at the many fragmented milk candies and the holes in her clothes with an aggrieved look on her face. She rolled her eyes a few times, turned around, and ran to the vicinity of the Tong residence to lie in ambush. When Tong Lan heard the explosion in the distance, she revealed a satisfied smile. Who asked you to snatch my candy? 3 times a month. Do you really think I'm made of clay? Although I can't beat you, technology is power. Miss Tong. Tong Lan looked in the direction of the voice, and saw a scholar jumping and waving at her. He was from the Shaojiang Academy. Tong Lan returned to the bakery, and bought a few more bags of candy. When she went out, she bumped into the scholar who was coming in. She ignored him and disappeared into the crowd. However, the moment she returned to the Tong residence, she felt a gust of wind blow by her side. The bag of candy that was tied to her waist suddenly disappeared. Ah, Lin Xiaola. I'm not done with you. Tong Lan went crazy instantly. Next time, I must bring a bag of candy stuffed with **T with me. Who asked you to snatch my candy? Who asked you to snatch my candy? Who asked you to snatch my candy? Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1047. Why? Yi Fengge looked miserable. Not far from him, Shanro was lying on the ground. There were no injuries on the surface, and her chest was heaving up and down. Her life was not in danger, but she had lost consciousness. As for Yanggan, his face was deathly pale. He tried to stand up but was powerless. This is a serious matter. If anything goes wrong, the entire human race will perish without a burial ground. If we don't do something like this, there will be too many people watching from the sidelines. Our power is too weak. This is the only way. Everyone is like this. If you are not a friend or an enemy, there is no other way. It is unreasonable. If you become an enemy, you must die. All 4 of you must die. Li Yuanzhu spoke in a flat tone. There was no sadness or other emotions in her eyes. It was as if the 3 people in front of her were like grass that could not cause any ripples in her heart. Yi Fengge's face changed. He turned his head to look at Shanro. If he had heard such news in the past, he would have been overjoyed. But now, his heart was filled with endless sorrow. Turning his head to look at Li Yuanzhu, Yi Fengge said in an extremely complicated tone. It is hard to imagine that you are Li Yuanzhu. This is the road ahead of us. No one can escape. Li Yuanzhu looked at him without avoiding his gaze. I may feel guilty towards you, but I have a clear conscience towards the greater good. It is your greater good, Yang Gan said angrily. You do not understand. Li Yuanju shook her head slightly. In the future, you will know that when the nest is overturned, no eggs will remain intact. Now give me an answer. Li Yuanju said no more. She lowered her eyelids and waited for the other party's reply. The wooden sword in her hand had disappeared. Her hands were hanging by her side. Her fingers were like bamboo shoots and her wrists were like white lotus roots. There was no trace of blood, but a pair of murderous hands. Yifanga said helplessly. I promise you that I can work for you. Shanro, let her go. There is not much to do and it is not difficult. It is for us and for yourself. As for Shanro, you cannot let her go. If you join us, you will be one of us. There is still a long way to go before the war. Both of you can watch your children grow up. When the time comes, you will know what to do even without my reminder. Li Yuanju said plainly. Yifanga gritted his teeth and laughed bitterly. What else can I do? The two of us will join you. That's great. I don't like to kill people. Li Yuanju nodded and looked at Yang Gan. What about you? You have wreaked havoc in the world. You will definitely suffer the wrath of the heavens, Yang Gan cursed. The heavens don't care about worldly affairs. Otherwise, how could the human race have fallen to such a state? All 319 people in your Jui manor are in your hands, Li Yuanju said faintly. Despicable. Yang Gan cursed angrily. He really couldn't believe that the dignified second in the world, who used to claim that she would never kill anyone, would actually threaten him with the entire morgue. Li Yuanju's eyelids continued to droop as if she was looking at weeds on the ground, but her aura was firmly locked onto him. Look at this grass. It withers in the winter and revives in the spring. No matter what is above it, be it soil or rocks, it has to push its way out. It's the same for us. It's not just my life, so there's nothing we can do even if we use despicable means. Yang Gan turned his head to look at Yifanga. Take care, elder brother. As soon as he finished speaking, before Yifanga could stop him, Yang Gan committed suicide. Why didn't you stop him? Yifanga glared angrily. Since he wanted to die, why should I stop him? Li Yuanju replied in an emotionless tone. Half a day later, Li Yuanju left the valley and went outside. She didn't mention the 319 people in Jui Manor again, as Yang Gan had intended. Chao Gui sat in the bookstore, feeling a little curious. There was a floor-to-ceiling window next to him, and the sunlight shone directly in, making his body hurt. There were a few ice buckets in the bookstore, but they emitted traces of cool air, making him feel extremely comfortable. This was the first time he saw a bookstore that allowed people to sit down and read books slowly. In bookstores in the Yin Nation, if one didn't buy a book, they would chase them out. Not only were there tables and chairs, but there were also ice buckets and even free ice water. One bowl of it would make one's heart feel cold and extremely comfortable. Chao Gui flipped through the book in front of him. It was different from the one in Black Bamboo Academy as it was written in Great Xia's language. This was the best-selling book here. After flipping through it for a while, Chao Gui began to feel a little uneasy. He crossed his legs as if he was hiding something, but the book in his hands was getting more and more difficult to put down. If he flipped the book over, he would see the title Golden Vase Plum. A godly book. After reading for more than an hour, Chao Gui closed the book and sat there in a daze for a moment. Then he paid for it and stuffed it into his pocket. After that, he went to some shops and saw some attractive items. For example, a flashlight could emit strong light when the switch was turned on. Furthermore, it could illuminate very far. It was compact and easy to carry, and it was much better than a lantern. However, this flashlight didn't sell well in Lon City. He had seen the night in Lon City. There were street lights everywhere, and there were very few dark places. Naturally, he didn't need this item. However, he liked it very much and bought 2 flashlights and a few batteries, spending more than 1 tael of silver. After walking around for a while, he saw aborigines selling all kinds of strange things in the mountains on the street. He also saw a few people gathering together to smoke a poisonous scorpion, with an intoxicated look on their faces. Finally, he saw a restaurant with the word Shanhuai written on it and immediately walked in. The students from the Salt Dao Academy still owed him a drink, but since he had seen it now, he might as well go in and sit for a while. Many people noticed him as soon as he entered. After all, most of the people here were the descendants of Aboriginal officials, and the merchants from the Yun Nation didn't come here. However, it wasn't a secret that many scholars from the Yun Nation came to Black Bamboo Academy. These descendants of officials were well informed, so no one went to find trouble with him. They allowed him to find a table in the corner, sit down, and chat happily. Chao Gui ordered a pot of wine and a plate of meat. He sat there and listened to the conversations of others. After listening for a long time, he heard a lot of things, which made him feel that this trip was worthwhile. However, not long after, he saw a little girl who looked like she was carved with jade poking her head in and sneakily looking around. Then she jumped in and punched the waiter in the eye. Although he was a waiter, he wasn't easy to deal with. After being punched for no reason, he waved his big fist and was about to retaliate. However, when he saw who it was, he immediately let out an ouch. "Were you the one who snitched the last time?" Honeysuckle was furious. She grabbed the waiter's collar and punched his eye a few times. The surrounding people recognized this little girl and immediately burst into laughter. "Little princess, are you here to drink again?" "Ouch, little ancestor, those two have spoken. How could we dare to let you drink here?" The waiter hurriedly begged for mercy. It wasn't that he was afraid of pain, nor was there any other reason. He just liked this little princess. "I don't care. You're a traitor. You caused me to be captured last time." Honeysuckle didn't care about that. After punching their eye sockets until they looked like pandas, she jumped onto an empty table and asked, "Is anyone treating me to a drink?" Since the little princess has spoken, how would we dare to not do so? Serve the little princess some wine. It's on us. Someone immediately laughed. Honeysuckle was overjoyed when she heard that. She looked around the shop and landed in front of Chao Gui in a flash. "I've never seen you before. You look strange." Honeysuckle was puzzled. The person in front of him was completely different from the burly men he had seen in the past. Chao Gui heard what everyone said just now and roughly guessed the identity of the person in front of him. However, he was a little puzzled. It was said that the current princess was only 3 years old. Why did she look like she was 8 or 9 years old? Although he was puzzled, he smiled and said, "Although we've never met before, I know your identity." "How do you know?" Honeysuckle was even more puzzled. However, the others looked over coldly. This was the current princess. If this scholar from the Yun Nation didn't know what was good for him, then he would be thrown into the smelly ditch to accompany the maggots. "Do you want to make a bet?" Chao Gui ignored the others and smiled. Everyone's expression turned even colder. Was this guy trying to deceive the princess? "I won't do it. They all know who I am." Honeysuckle wasn't old, but she wasn't as gullible as others thought. She felt that someone must have told him who she was. Honeysuckle rolled her eyes and said, "Why don't we make a bet on who can drink first?" Chao Gui was stunned. Then he smiled and said, "I'll do as you say." Even if he guessed wrong, this person was only 8 or 9 years old. If he guessed correctly, he was only 3 years old. Judging from everyone's reaction just now, it should be fine to drink with her. At the very least, he wouldn't be captured and beheaded. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Then their gazes became strange. "What if you lose?" Honeysuckle suddenly asked. Chao Gui looked at her with a smile. He really didn't think that he would lose to her. Even a burly aboriginal might not be able to defeat him, let alone a little girl like her. "What do you think?" Chao Gui teased her. "Call me Dad." Honeysuckle immediately stood on the stool and announced loudly, "What? Call me Dad." Honeysuckle pointed at herself and couldn't hide the excitement on her face. Baidu search 881 Chinese website yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1048. Let me tell you something. Rinpochian poked the Empress's waist with his finger, but there was no response. He used all his strength to poke the Empress's waist twice. If it were concrete, he would have poked 2 holes in it. Finally, he managed to divert the Empress's attention. "Itchy." The Empress slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me. We are an old couple now. Renbaqian pulled the Empress into his arms and kissed her on the cheek. Not far away, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan covered their mouths and giggled. They found it very interesting to look at these two every day. What do you want to say? The Empress asked helplessly. Well, you should be mentally prepared first. Renbaqian's expression was very strange and complicated. You talk too much. What's the matter? You have leveled up and become a grandmother. Renbaqian said in a very sorrowful tone, as if the child had finally grown up. The Empress was at a loss. What are you talking about? You have a grandson. Renbaqian changed the way he phrased it. Oh. The Empress nodded her head gently. After 10 seconds, she finally reacted and raised her voice. What did you say? What happened? Hua is a father. Renbaqian finally stopped teasing the Empress. When he recalled what he had just heard, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She forced people to call her father and even beat them up. In an instant, the Empress's expression became extremely wonderful. It was as if a flower had bloomed. Renbaqian then recounted what happened in Shanhui House. When he sent someone to capture Hua, he also brought back what happened inside. After listening to him, the Water Empress was silent for a while, and then she said, "Kill him." Renbaqian waved his hand and said, "There's no need. The other party didn't do it on purpose. I had my suspicions before, but I sent someone to inquire about the situation in detail. I also sent someone to inquire about this person's past. It should be a coincidence." He didn't think much of it at first. He was just teasing her. She was the one who suggested the bet. He didn't expect that she could keep drinking. I heard that he was about to cry. Hua even punched him a few times and forced him to call him daddy. The Empress's expression softened a little. She squinted at Renbaqian and asked, "Is this what you taught him? What does it have to do with me?" Renbaqian spread his hands. "Otherwise, why don't you call me mom or grandma?" The Empress sneered. This was indeed a question worth pondering. Where's Hua? She is being punished to copy the Analects of Confucius. Chao Gui woke up from his coma and felt as if his throat was on fire. He staggered to the ground and gulped down the bowl of water on the table. Only then did he feel better. "Brother Chao? Awake? What happened last night? If someone hadn't picked you up outside, you'd probably be sleeping outside for the whole night. Also, who hit your eyes?" A scholar pushed open the door and came in. Seeing that he was awake, he immediately asked. Recalling what happened last night, Chao Gui immediately covered his face. He confirmed that the other party was indeed the current princess, a 3-year-old girl. He was actually forced to call her father. Although he was willing to admit defeat, Chao Gui didn't think he was a sore loser. However, when the little princess saw his hesitation, she immediately gave him 2 punches. In the end, it was as if he was beaten to the point of calling her father, and she was just a 3-year-old girl. At the thought of this, Chao Gui felt like killing himself. "Don't ask about this," Chao Gui said gloomily. The other party didn't say much after seeing him like this. "We are setting off in a while. There will be a lecture in a while. We will do it tomorrow. Is it all right for you to speak?" Chao Gui rubbed the dark circles under his eyes and let out a wry smile. "Do I look like I'm okay? Let Hualong or Yuan Pei speak." "This is a great opportunity," the scholar said with a smile. It was a great opportunity to show his face in front of the various academies and the high-ranking officials of Dayo. "Forget it." Chao Gui waved his hand. He wished he could cover his face when he went out. Law is the compilation of maps and records, which are set up in the government and distributed to the people. Don't rely on others for your good, and don't use them for wrong. Don't rely on others for your good, and don't use them for wrong within the borders. Don't use people for wrong, and one country can make all. For the sake of governance, use the masses and abandon the few. Therefore, don't focus on virtue but on law. Renbaqian listened to the scholar who was standing on the stage in front of him speak with fervor and assurance. This seems to be the doctrine of legalism. It wasn't strange for this world to develop doctrines similar to legalism. Not to mention the inexplicable connection between this world and Earth. The essence of every world and every period was similar. It wasn't strange for ideas similar to the 100 schools of thought to appear. On the stage were students from Jiangling Academy. This academy was famous for advocating law. In the future, the new laws would be revised, and the students from this academy would be of some use. Renbaqian valued this academy quite a lot. Although the laws on Earth were more complete, each period had its own characteristics, and the laws on Earth might not be suitable for this world. Currently, his Black Bamboo Academy was focusing all its energy on promoting technology, and naturally didn't have the time to care about other aspects. These academies could be used as a supplement. This was also the reason why he invited so many academies this time. The world doesn't have a finger, and nothing can be called a thing. If it doesn't point to the world, then what can it be called a finger? If it points to what the world doesn't have, then what can it be called a finger? If it points to what the world doesn't have, then it can't be. These were students from Zhiwu Academy and were known for their eloquence. They advocated emphasizing the relationship between name and reality, which was essentially a form of logic. Unfortunately, they were debating philosophical issues that had nothing to do with politics. The biggest characteristic of the students of this academy was sophistry, but their biggest weakness was that they only knew how to use sophistry. They didn't have the means to maneuver and weren't good at lobbying like the school of vertical and horizontal. As a result, although this academy was famous in the Yun nation, it was famous for sophistry and didn't have much influence. In fact, it had been declining over the years. Most of the students from Jitai Academy were women, and their expertise in theory caught Renbaqian's attention. They were good at collecting all kinds of gossip, big and small news, and compiling them into a compilation. At the same time, they were also good at compiling ballads that were spread among the people. Although their status wasn't high, they were very useful. Whether it was in court or in business, there were opportunities for them to show their skills. According to Renbaqian, they could guide the opinions of the people, collect information at the same time, and create a favorable market orientation. As a result, the women from Jitai Academy were quite useful, especially for those merchants or families. If they married a woman from Jitai Academy, she would be of great use in many places. Shaojiang Academy was good at economics and advocated, "When the country is rich, people from afar will come. When the land is established, the people will stay. When the granaries are full, they will know etiquette. When they have enough food and clothing, they will know honor and disgrace." At the same time, they were proficient in mathematics. The scholars from Shaojiang Academy could master a certain area and volume calculation method, a certain proportion theory, and mathematical tools such as the Pythagorean theorem. On the other hand, Baiquan Academy was good at medicine, divination, astrology, and physiognomy. Not to mention the latter three, they had produced many famous doctors. At the same time, the students of Baiquan Academy were also quite good at mathematics. Fenghu Academy, which was one of the 5 major academies along with General Academy, Shaojiang Academy, and Baiquan Academy, knew a little of everything but was proficient in nothing. They were good at everything. As for Wangjing Academy, Renbaqian was about to doze off after listening for a while. If there was a Confucian school in this world, then the students of Wangjing Academy were undoubtedly the rotten scholars. 3 days of lectures passed in a flash, and the last one was Black Bamboo Academy. After all, they had the honor of being the host. The previous visits had broadened the horizons of the other academies, so they were the finale. The one on stage was Shiryu, and the content of his lecture caused a huge uproar. The content of Shiryu's lecture was the theory of the flat earth. Faced with the shock of the crowd, Shiryu was already prepared and immediately threw out a few methods to prove it. The first was the arc of the sea. Using the mast of a ship as a reference was the simplest and most clear method. The second was the full moon, the waning moon, and the dim moon. The third was the shadow. 2 rods were separated by a certain distance to produce a shadow. If the world was flat, no matter how far apart the 2 rods were, the shadow would be the same. On the other hand, it proved that the ground was curved. Finally, Shiryu directly used his ultimate move to raise a hot air balloon. Since words don't make sense, then go up to the sky and see for yourself. Shiryu shrugged and spread out his hands. Up to the sky. That's right, up to the sky. You will understand when you are in the sky. There was another uproar below. At this point, most of the academies knew that Dayo actually had a tool that allowed people to fly. Chapter 1049. Hot air balloons weren't a big deal for the first few batches of students at Black Bamboo Academy, but the students in the last 2 years hadn't seen them much. There were too many ferocious beasts in the sky, unlike on Earth where there were mostly small birds, and golden eagles with wingspans of 2 meters were rare. Giant beasts with wingspans of more than 10 meters were often seen in the sky of this world. They were at the man-will level, and could reach the earth-will level. Such a sky was extremely dangerous for most people. Only spirit-will experts had the ability to protect themselves in the sky. Therefore, Renbachian wasn't prepared to promote hot air balloons in this world. After making hot air balloons for Li Fu, the other 2 hot air balloons in the academy were made by Li Fu. Even the last few batches of students hadn't seen them before, let alone the people of the Yun Nation. It was already the morning of the next day, and everyone was eagerly watching the students of Black Bamboo Academy prepare the hot air balloons outside the city. The weather was beautiful. Although the sun was blazing, there wasn't much wind. After 2 hours, the hot air balloon was ready. The brazier below the hot air balloon was lit, and a few students were chosen to go up. The others looked around enviously. As time passed, the hot air balloon gradually expanded. It's up, it's up. Everyone stared at the hot air balloon as it gradually left the ground until the rope below it snapped straight. Senior, thank you for your trouble. Renbachian greeted Li Fu. When is your daughter going to learn martial arts from me? Li Fu squatted down and looked at the hot air balloon, and then at Renbachian. I can't forget. How old is she? 3 years old. Renbachian raised 3 fingers to emphasize. How does she look like she's 3 years old? Li Fu smacked his lips. That's still 3 years old. Renbachian reiterated. Li Fu sighed faintly. In any case, he was the most powerful expert in the world. In order to teach that little girl, he didn't even have the title of master and disciple. He even had to beg him to teach her. I'll have to trouble you to take care of those students. If anything happens, bring Shiryu back alive. Renbachian reiterated his request. Puffed, your students are lives but others aren't. Li Fu spat and didn't care about his image at all. Alright, I'm going up. Li Fu couldn't be bothered to listen to what Renbachian had to say and strolled to the bottom of the hot air balloon. Before the others could see clearly, they saw that there was an extra person in the basket below the hot air balloon. Isn't this the gatekeeper of the Black Bamboo Academy? He's actually an expert. Many students only knew that this person was very powerful, but they did not know exactly how powerful he was. On the contrary, those Earthwill experts were aghast. They couldn't even see the other party's movements clearly. How strong was he exactly? The people below loosened the rope, and the hot air balloon slowly rose into the sky. The few people standing on the hot air balloon could not hide their excitement. In fact, apart from Shiryu and Li Fu, only 4 students could fly into the sky. However, the hearts of the people below were surging with excitement, and their eyes were shining. It wasn't until the hot air balloon had become a small dot in everyone's eyes that many people's necks were sore and swollen that they retracted their gazes. Trucks, tractors, and trains were the 3 most powerful forms of transportation on land. Now there was a tool that could carry people into the sky. Many people looked at him. This Zhao Prince consort was truly a celestial being. At this rate, they did not know what Dayo would look like in 10 or 20 years. After more than an hour, the hot air balloon slowly descended from the sky again. It actually rose and fell from the same place without deviating from its position at all. Many students who had never been to the sky didn't know what the problem was and thought that it was just like that. Only Renbachian and a few other students knew that this was because of Li Fu. This ingenious use of power was worthy of being called a top expert in the world. Brother Jihua, how do you feel? How does it feel to look from the sky? Can you see the celestial palace? As soon as everyone came down, they were immediately surrounded by people. One of them was Su Jihua from the Jiangling Academy. Wait. Wretch. Su Jihua's face turned pale, and he quickly raised his hand to stop the crowd from approaching. He couldn't hold it in any longer and vomited on the spot. As the second group of people rose into the sky in the hot air balloon, the few people who had finally recovered began to answer the questions of the others. Naturally, there was no celestial palace. Looking down from the sky was similar to looking down from the top of a mountain. Cold. They had always thought that the higher they went, the closer they were to the sun, and the hotter it would be. They didn't expect that the higher they went, the colder it would be. Most importantly, there was another problem. Su Jihua had a complicated look on his face as he said, "The earth is indeed curved." Su Jihua didn't say that the earth was round, but that it was curved. However, this was enough to explain some problems. The higher they went, the further away the horizon was. Although it could be seen from the mountains, it wasn't as visually impactful as the horizon getting further and further away as they went up in the hot air balloon. No matter how much they didn't want to admit it, they had to admit that the earth was indeed curved. The question was the earth a circle or a semicircle? No matter how much they struggled with this point, at least Shiryu and the others had achieved their goal. As for whether it was a circle or a semicircle, in this world where it was difficult to circumnavigate the world, it was impossible to get everyone's approval in a short period of time. On the contrary, Rinpoche had some ideas. It was about time to start exploring the situation overseas. He didn't know what the turbulent zone was like. What other dangers were there in the sea? What kind of scenery would he see after crossing the sea? Although Rinpoche wanted to find out, he knew that things had to be done step by step. He had to settle this group of students first, then try to collect as much information as possible about the sea, and then design and build ships. Rinpoche pondered his ideas as he returned to the city. The hot air balloon's ascent outside the city hadn't ended yet. According to the plan, there were still 2 more groups of people, but he didn't have that much time to wait. Not long after he entered the city, someone caught up from behind and asked to see Rinpoche. Students from Wangjing Academy? Rinpoche wasn't very interested after hearing who it was. He wasn't interested in this academy at all. However, he could give the other party a chance and listen to what he had to say. Rinpoche found a restaurant, ordered people to clear the second floor, and sat at a table to wait for the guards to bring the person up. Changlu greets Your Highness. The person who came was a young man in his 20s. The deepest impression that Rinpoche had was his pair of eyes that were like reptiles, emitting a gloomy aura. Although he stood respectfully in front of Rinpoche, he was like a venomous snake that could bite him at any time. If you have anything to say, say it. Rinpoche didn't let the other party sit down. Instead, he poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip, and said faintly, Your Highness, Wangjing Academy is rotten to the core. Changlu's words made Rinpoche slightly interested. Continue. Seeing that he was interested, Changlu's confidence was boosted, and she felt that this trip was a success. As Changlu explained, Rinpoche gradually understood the other party's intentions. Although Changlu's first sentence made Rinpoche a little interested, the rest of the content was lackluster. It was nothing more than Wangjing Academy being controlled by a group of old teachers, and it exuded a rotten smell from top to bottom. Although it was still the head of the 5 major academies in name, its reputation was declining day by day. Changlu's uncle was the mountain chief of Wangjing Academy, below the dean and above the ordinary teachers. This time he didn't send these students to compete with the other academies, but to let Rinpoche understand the current situation of the academy. He wanted to use Rinpoche's leadership to implement reforms, sweep away those rotten old fellows, and correct the style of learning. Simply put, he wanted to use Rinpoche's hands to seize power. No need to say more. Rinpoche waved his hand, and didn't even bother to listen to the other party's report. The other party was relying on the reputation of one of the 5 major academies, and felt that he would care about this academy. Previously, he had already learned about the various academies, such as Xiaojiang Academy and Jiangling Academy, which were indeed useful and worthy of the title of the 5 major academies. However, what they learned in Wangjing Academy was suitable for the Yun nation's written examinations, but it was no longer suitable for this fast-developing era. 5 major academies? Forget it. Although those old fellows in the academy exuded a rotten smell, Chonglu's uncle wasn't a good person either. He actually wanted to use Renbaqian to seize power, and he even sent these 7 students. If it weren't for these 7 people, Renbaqian would at most ignore them and let them gradually fall behind this era before finally being buried in the dust. However, after looking at the examination papers of these students, Renbaqian had already made up his mind. This academy, which was hostile to the aboriginals, had no value at all. The reputation of the 5 major academies was worthless in front of him. It's time for Wangjing Academy to become history. There will be no such academy in the future. Renbaqian got up and left after saying this. He didn't even have the mood to listen to what the other party had to say. He felt that his time had been wasted. Since there was an empty spot in the 5 major academies, it was better to use Jitai Academy. As for the people from Wangjing Academy and the scholars who had graduated from that academy, how would they react? Renbaqian didn't care at all. If they dared to cause trouble, he would behead them. By limiting the scope to Wangjing Academy, the other scholars would certainly have some reaction, but it could also be limited to a certain range. It was better than keeping a group of writers who were hostile to the imperial court. Chonglu was stunned and flustered. "Your Highness." However, before he could chase after them, he was blocked by the guards. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Scholar House. Chapter 1050. I'll update it tomorrow night. The pretty boy of the Empress's family apologies. I have something to attend to and will be taking 2 days off. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1051. Chonglu was in disbelief. He didn't expect Renbaqian to ban Wangjing Academy. Wangjing Academy had a history of hundreds of years. Even though it wasn't as powerful as it used to be, it still had a huge influence in the Yun nation. Furthermore, it affected the literati. Since ancient times, literati had been the group that the imperial court cared about the most. Literati could enter the imperial court and enlighten the common people. They also had the prestige and ability to influence the people. Wangjing Academy naturally played an important role in this regard. Because of this and the huge influence and value of Wangjing Academy, Chonglu had always believed that as long as he explained his intentions, he would definitely receive support. At that time, the Chong family would be able to take charge of this influential academy with hundreds of years of history. As one of the 5 great academies, publicly supporting the Dayo imperial court was presumably what the other party needed. However, he didn't expect that the other party would only say, "It's time to wipe out history," and not say anything else. If Wangjing Academy was banned, wouldn't the other party know how much turmoil it would cause and how many literati would denounce it? However, this was only the opinion of him and the Chong family. If it were in the previous dynasties, this would indeed be the case. However, in Renbaqian's opinion, it was a different matter. Although Wangjing Academy could indeed set off some waves, it would only cause some waves and wouldn't affect the overall situation. Although literati were influential, there was another group of people with equally great influence in the Yun nation. The merchants, or rather, the chambers of commerce. These people were the ones who could truly influence the food, clothing, housing, and transportation of the common people, and thus affect everything in the Yun nation. The Yun nation was different from Dayo. Dayo didn't have merchants, and the people bartered because Dayo was already backward. As long as the imperial court could guarantee the supply of salt and iron to the people, it would be fine. The Yun nation was a prosperous commercial society. For farmers, they had to rely on merchants to buy and sell food, clothes, and groceries. As for the commoners in the city, they were hired by the Chamber of Commerce to work for them. Many people had been working for the same Chamber of Commerce for generations. Everyone could live without contact with words, poems, and essays, but it was impossible not to come into contact with merchants, a group that extended their reach in all aspects. His influence on the merchants was naturally needless to say. Knives, policies, and transportation. It could be said that he could kill any merchant or Chamber of Commerce if he wanted them to. With his knowledge from the modern world and his identity, It was a piece of cake for him to kill a merchant or chamber of commerce. In modern society, it was easy for a highly centralized government to target an enterprise, let alone in this feudal society. In such a situation, he did not even need a knife. He only needed to give a signal, and through the Chamber of Commerce and his family, he could control the life and death of those literati who jumped out. For example, they couldn't even buy a grain of rice or a grain of salt. Of course he wouldn't do that. He would be criticized by others. At the end of the day, Wangjing Academy was only one of the 5 great academies. So what if it was banned? Although there would be some disturbance, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. As for what the other party was thinking, they were thinking too much. The next morning, many academies found that one of the courtyards was empty. The people from Wangjing Academy were gone. Many people were shocked. Their first reaction was to wonder if they had offended someone, and the people from Wangjing College were killed. In Dayo, this was perfectly normal. In an instant, everyone quivered. Fortunately, someone quickly informed them that the people from Wangjing Academy had been sent back. As for the reason, no one said. Everyone was bewildered and didn't know what had happened. They could only suppress their emotions for now. The first thing to do was to respond to Zhao Prince Consort summons. Now that the test papers had been answered, the Black Bamboo Academy had been visited, and the lecture was over, it was time to get down to business. Although the process wasn't quite the same as what they had imagined, everyone imagined that this trip would be to showcase the students of each academy, surpass the other academies, and gain the greatest honor to enter the eyes of the imperial court. However, they weren't given much of a chance to showcase themselves. Even though it was a 3-day lecture, only Zhao Prince Consort attended. On the contrary, they were the ones who gave the unknown Black Bamboo Academy a fright. Until now, everyone was still guessing what was going on with the demons and monsters in Black Bamboo Academy. However, after receiving the summons, everyone knew that the final moment was coming. However, to their surprise, what awaited them wasn't a summons. Instead, they were transported out of the city by trucks. "Cousin Chung, do you think they're going to kill all of us?" Someone whispered. "I don't think so." The person who was questioned immediately turned pale. Everyone else also tensed up. If it was someone else, they definitely wouldn't do that. However, if it was the Aboriginal barbarians, it would be hard to say. "Don't worry. I asked them earlier, and from what I heard, they are going to the new city." A student who was resting opened his eyes and said, "New city?" Everyone was puzzled. The construction of the new city wasn't a secret in Lan City, and many of the merchants from the Yun Nation had heard about it. However, these scholars had never heard of it before. Why are they going there? What followed was a deep sense of doubt. "You will know when you get there." That student closed his eyes and rested again. At this moment, Run Baqian was sitting in a car with a gratified look on his face. He didn't expect to sit in a car in this world so soon. This was a handmade product of the laboratory. There were a total of 5 cars, 2 of which were kept in the laboratory as reference, and the other 3 were sent to the palace. Sitting in this car was at least much more comfortable than sitting in the Crow General. Tonglan, Zhuhua, and 2 flowers were squeezed in the back seat. "Yagui, why are you bringing them to the new city?" Tonglan took out a few candies and threw them to 2 flowers, and Zhuhua with a playful look on her face. She didn't have a good impression of the people from the Yin Nation. "Have you been to the new city?" Renbaqian asked. "I went there a few years ago." Tonglan complained. "I would like to see it if you gave me less homework." "Ha!" Renbaqian chuckled. "It's impossible to give you less homework. You are lucky that you don't have more homework. If you didn't have that homework, how could you guys who only have muscles for brains get to where you are today? You will know how spectacular and shocking the new city is when you go there," Renbaqian said casually. And then, although these students from the Yin Nation don't have much ability in science and technology, they are still capable as grassroots and even middle-level officials. If there aren't enough Aboriginal officials, they will have to make up for it. What does this have to do with letting them go to the new city? It's to let them see a whole new world so that they don't put in the effort or have other schemes, Renbaqian said concisely. In fact, this was only part of the reason. This was a unique city, and he needed to spread the news of this city to the entire Yun nation through the mouths of these people. These students from the Yun nation were only the first batch. Next, there would be chambers of commerce and various families from the Yun nation. Not only did he want to use this city to change people's impression of Dayo, but he also needed people to enrich this new city. It couldn't be that this city would be empty when the capital was moved, right? As for Lon City, it would be the transportation hub of Dayo in the future. Not only could it not be emptied, but it would also need to be filled in the future. I'm sorry, my readers. Something unexpected happened, and the original 2-day trip became 5 days. This is the update, and there will be more updates starting today. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising messages. Chapter 1052. No one knew why Zhao Prince Consort brought them to the new city. Even the deans of the various academies couldn't figure it out. However, when the brand new city came closer, many students stood up from the trucks, held onto the railings on both sides, and looked into the distance with their mouths wide open. There are no city walls? Many people found it unbelievable. That's right, there were no city walls. Unlike other cities, the first thing one could see from afar was the city walls. As for this city, the first thing that could be seen was the towering stone pillars in the distance, which made one feel quite confused. However, when they got closer, the most surprising thing was that there were no city walls and they could see the scenery inside the city. They probably think that no enemy can get close to this city. It's really incredible that there's no defense at all. After all, this is the hinterland of Dayo. Aren't they worried that someone will rebel? Although Qi Zixiao is the third most powerful person in the world, that doesn't mean that her descendants are the same. Her daughter was born with the strength of an earth wheel expert. Maybe she'll be stronger than her when she grows up. No matter how strong she is, she can't resist an army of 1 million soldiers, right? Maybe the city walls haven't been built yet. They should build the interior first before building the city walls. Many people agreed with this. However, this city is so big. I didn't feel it from afar, but now that I'm closer, there are buildings everywhere I look. What a big city. It's much bigger than Lon City. Someone suddenly realized something. Could this be the new capital? Are they moving the capital? Now that you mention it, it's possible. After all, this is the hinterland, less than half a day's journey from Lon City. It's surrounded by plains and there are waterways. Transportation is more convenient than in Lon City. In addition, the city is 10 times bigger than Lon City. Maybe they really want to move the capital. While everyone was discussing, the city with countless stone pillars arrived in front of them, and they began to enter the city. Everyone's first impression was that it was big, wide, and majestic. The road was at least 30 feet wide. The widest road in Wangjing was only 10 feet wide, but the road in this city was actually 30 feet wide. In addition to the 30 feet wide road, there were 2 roads that were 1 foot above the ground. Each road was actually 20 feet wide, adding up to a total of 140 feet. Even if a huge truck were to drive on this road, it would still seem extremely small. Rin Baqian looked satisfied in the car. It was a total of 37 meters, with a 2-meter-wide green belt in the middle and 2 7-meter-wide sidewalks on both sides. His design was based on a bustling modern city. Although such a wide road might seem unnecessary now, it would become a foresight in 20 or 30 years. Everyone entered from the north gate. This area had been completely constructed, including water pipes, cable pipes, and even underground space for a subway. Ren Baqian's request was not to place the cables in the air. Naturally, he wouldn't install trams on the ground either. There were simply too many people who liked to climb and jump high. Among the group of top experts in Great Xia, there were a few who would jump onto electric poles and look into the distance when they had nothing better to do. The Aboriginal experts also had this hobby. Not long after Lon City was electrified, a few people were seriously injured. If it weren't for the Aboriginals' good physique, the fact that they were at the earthwheel level, which made them more resistant to electricity, and the fact that the voltage in Lon City wasn't too high, they would have been put into the box. Even so, they were not much different from medium-rare steaks. Therefore, it was necessary to bury the cables underground. Considering that they would need to lay the network in the future, they might as well lay cement pipes so that they could repair and replace the cables through the sewers in the future. Stop the car. Renbachian called out to the driver. After getting out of the car, Erhua seemed to have come to a new world. He cheered and began to run around on the road. The car behind also stopped. After the driver asked Renbachian about it, everyone got out of the car. Let's go and take a look at this new city, Renbachian said to the deans and teachers of the various academies. What a big city, but why don't I see the city walls? Someone exclaimed in admiration before asking the doubt in his heart. City walls? If we are attacked here, what's the point of having city walls? The best defense is offense, Renbachian said faintly and smiled. Moreover, who can be Dayo's enemy? The word Great Xia appeared in everyone's mind. Or rather, it was the next dynasty of Great Xia. The current situation of Great Xia was very clear. If there were no accidents, Great Xia wouldn't last for more than a few years. As long as they recuperated for 20 years and relied on their tens of millions of people and vast territory, they would be able to rise again. With enough food, the Aboriginals can recruit 1 million elite soldiers and 100,000 winged cavalry warriors. Renbachian's words were so powerful that everyone felt a chill in their hearts. It had to be known that it only took 90,000 elite soldiers to conquer the Yun nation. 1 million elite Aboriginal soldiers. At least 10 million soldiers would be needed to contend against them. With 100,000 winged cavalry warriors and 100,000 earthwheel experts, no one would be able to resist them. Even if Su Qing established a new dynasty, he wouldn't dare to declare war on Dayo, Renbachian thought. These people didn't know about nuclear bombs, but he should have heard of them. Your Highness, are these buildings on both sides all pavilions? Someone changed the topic and asked as he looked at the stone pillars on both sides. Although they were different from traditional buildings, everyone could see the windows on those buildings that were densely distributed on the cement walls. The reason why everyone was puzzled was that these buildings were too tall, and there were too many of them. As far as the eye could see, they could see a large number of stone pillars forming a stone forest, which was shocking. That's right. Renbachian nodded and gave a brief introduction. These cement buildings were similar to the buildings of the future. They were 6 stories tall, but they were much taller than the buildings of the future. The first floor was 5 meters high, and each subsequent floor was 4 meters high, which was 1 meter higher than the usual 3 meters. The distance between the buildings was also relatively large. The reason for this height was partly due to the materials used, but there were also other reasons. Although the high-rise buildings on the periphery were inhabited by civilians, there were also many Kismet heaven experts among them. It was possible for them to break through the floors, or even the load-bearing pillars. If a couple fought at home and collapsed the building, who would believe it? However, it wasn't impossible in Dayo. There was no other way because there weren't enough steel bars. Therefore, the buildings couldn't be too tall, and the outer walls couldn't be too thick. At the same time, the distance between the buildings had to be large. Of course, this wasn't high for Renbachian. For others, this was already majestic enough. Renbachian led the crowd forward, occasionally talking to the many deans behind him while the students whispered to each other. The more they looked, the more frightened and shocked they were. Big, it was really too big. Just like the previous sensory organs, every road and every building in the city was too big. The gray cement buildings looked the same, but as they stood there and stretched into the distance, it gave people a unique sense of beauty and shock. How many people can this city accommodate? More than 1 million people, Renbachian replied. This is only for now. In the future, the population may reach 10 million. Following Renbachian's words, there was a uniform gasp. What did a population of 10 million mean? One had to know that the most prosperous capital of Great Xia only had a population of 1 million. This was the result of thousands of years of development. Wangjing only had a population of 600,000. Even so, it was difficult to supply the entire Great Xia with the surrounding food production, and had to be transported from other cities. There was also another point. With such a large population and no land around, how could these people make a living? In addition to food, there were also sewage, transportation, firewood, and so on. There were too many problems in all aspects. At this thought, everyone felt that a city with a population of 10 million was simply impossible. Even a population of 1 million was completely unnecessary for the current Dayo. One had to know that Lan City only had a population of less than 100,000. However, everyone was even more puzzled as to why Zhao Prince Consort brought them here. Even if they wanted to relocate people, there was nothing they could do. The students at the back didn't think so much. One by one, they sized up this huge and empty city and were all speechless. It was simply too spectacular. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into a modern steel jungle. They were shocked as they looked around. This was a futuristic scene. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising slogans. Chapter 1053. Why are you acting so weird today? Ma Hualong patted Chao Gui's back with a surprised look on his face. It's rare to see you like this. Chao Gui looked away from the bouncing girl in the distance and pretended that nothing had happened. It's nothing. Nothing? Ma Hualong looked at him and then at the girl in the distance. You seem to have been hiding from her. Were you afraid that she would see you? No. Chao Gui forced himself to be calm. Ma Hualong looked at him again and changed the topic. This city is really spectacular. It's completely different from what I've seen before. Indeed. Chao Gui nodded. Although he had focused most of his attention on the little princess, he was still amazed by the size of the city, the magnificence of the buildings, and the spaciousness of the space. This place was different from all the cities he had seen before. In the minds of these students, cities should be like the Yun Nation or Great Xia, including Lan City. Although there were some differences, there wasn't much of a difference. However, this place was completely different as it belonged to the future. Although they didn't have the concept of science fiction and the future world, standing here gave them a feeling that this wasn't a city that belonged to the present. Everyone walked along the road. After a while, he let them stop to rest and let them take a look at the buildings on the side. All the students dispersed. Even some of the deans couldn't help but walk to the front of the buildings to take a closer look. Chao Gui hid behind someone for fear that the girl who was running around would see him. There were 2 times when she ran to the back of the group of students, which scared him so much that his heart almost jumped out. Who's that girl? She came with Zhao Prince Consort, but she looks about 10 years old. She shouldn't be the princess, right? Ma Hualong asked casually as he looked around after entering a certain building. I don't know. I don't know her. Chao Gui was afraid that Ma Hualong would see through him. If others knew about what happened that day, he wouldn't be able to face anyone. The 2 of them walked around the building and even climbed up the stairs, only to see that it was filled with rooms. The 2 of them were dizzy from walking around. They were used to houses and couldn't understand the layout of this kind of building. An earthling would be able to tell at a glance that this was a house type designed in the style of Earth. Each house had 3 bedrooms, 1 living room, 1 bathroom and 1 kitchen. It was about 100 square meters. There were a few types of buildings in the city. The first type was for the commoners in the outer ring. Ren Baqian was going to give them away for free. As long as they moved into the new city, he would give them one. When young people got married, he would give them another one. At the very least, after 10 or 20 years, he would consider selling the houses. As for the residences in the inner ring, they were allocated by the Empress to the officials in the imperial court. The only residential areas for sale were the high-end residential areas between the outer ring and the inner ring. They were all single-family villas, which were prepared for businessmen. Just as the 2 of them reached the 3rd floor, they saw 2 people jumping in through the window. When Chao Gui saw who they were, his entire body stiffened. He wanted to hide, but the other party saw him clearly. Honeysuckle jumped through the window and saw the 2 of them in the room. She didn't pay much attention to them, but Chao Gui's stiff and evasive behavior caught her attention. When she saw that face, she was suspicious at first. Her body moved and she scurried in front of him. She stared at him and rolled her eyes. I think I've seen you before. You must have mistaken me for someone else. Chao Gui covered his face with one hand. I seem to have smelled this before. Honeysuckle sniffed and became even more suspicious. Let me take a look at your face. Your Highness, what's the matter? Zhu Hua crossed her arms and curiously sized up the two of them. She glanced at the ugly Ma Hualong and stared at Qiao Gui. She frowned and said, "Why are you evading my gaze? Something's wrong." "No, you must have mistaken me for someone else," Qiao Gui replied. "Take your hand down," Zhu Hua said in a deep voice. "I'm too ugly. I'm afraid I'll scare the two of you." As Qiao Gui spoke, he took his hand down. Ma Hualong turned his head and almost spat. He saw that Qiao Gui's eyes were big and small, and his mouth was crooked to one side. He looked like an idiot. "Do you think I'm a fool?" Zhu Hua didn't say anything else and struck him with her palm. "I'm really ugly." Qiao Gui's body floated backward. However, just as he dodged Zhu Hua's palm, his clothes were pulled by someone. Honeysuckle tugged at his clothes and became even more suspicious. "I've definitely seen you before. You must have mistaken me for someone else." Ma Hualong admired Qiao Gui's ability to maintain his crooked mouth and eyes when he spoke. Honeysuckle sniffed and sniffed again and again. Then he came to a realization. "You're the one who made the bet that day." Qiao Gui was scared out of his wits. Cold sweat dripped down his back as he denied repeatedly, "You've mistaken me for someone else." Zhu Hua sneered. "How dare you lie to Her Highness? Do you want me to bring you to Prince Consort Zhao?" Qiao Gui could only smile bitterly. If this matter was brought to Prince Consort Zhao, he wouldn't be able to show his face anymore. His expression returned to normal. He looked down at Honeysuckle and smiled bitterly. "Grandaunt, can you just pretend you didn't see me? Don't call me Grandaunt. Call me Father." Honeysuckle's eyes were sparkling and his face was full of joy. This was the first person who called him father. He was a little worried when he was brought back that day. What if he couldn't find him in the future? He didn't expect to find him so soon. Qiao Gui's position in Honeysuckle's heart was very high, close to that of the roaring emperor. Ma Hualong almost choked when he heard Honeysuckle's words. His eyes widened. He already knew the identity of the person in front of him. She was the current princess who was said to be only 3 years old. However, what he was most curious about was the relationship between the current princess and Qiao Gui. Seeing that he couldn't avoid it, Qiao Gui made up his mind. The bet that day was settled that day. Ma Hualong immediately understood. Then he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Qiao Gui had actually called the current princess father. And he had even lost the bet? Ha, this was simply too satisfying. However, thinking about it, Qiao Gui didn't seem to have lost out. "No, I didn't say that I would only call you father that day. If you call me father, I'll bring you to see my lord father." Honeysuckle rolled his eyes. He seemed to be very afraid when Zhu Hua wanted to bring him to see his lord father. Honeysuckle was young and inexperienced. He often did things that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. However, he was smart and immediately found the other party's weak point. Qiao Gui's face turned red and twitched a few times. He knew that he would be done for if he was dragged to see Zhao Prince Consort. As long as what happened that day was exposed, he would become a laughingstock. He made up his mind and gritted his teeth. "Father." Honeysuckle immediately beamed with joy. He raised his arm and patted Qiao Gui's chest. His voice was like a drum. "If anyone bullies you in the future, just say my name." Ma Hualong and Zhu Hua were laughing so hard that they almost cramped up. Ma Hualong was still able to hold it in, but Zhu Hua was laughing unrestrainedly. Tears were almost flowing out of her eyes. She had long known about Honeysuckle's bad habit. However, it was simply unheard of to see a scholar from the Yun nation being forced by Honeysuckle to call him father. "Little ancestor, please let me go." Qiao Gui looked aggrieved. His face was red, yellow, blue, and purple as if he was running a dye shop. "Not little ancestor, call me father," Honeysuckle said stubbornly. "Father, please let me go. Don't let anyone know that I still want to see people." Qiao Gui was on the verge of tears. "Why? You can't see people if you call me father?" Honeysuckle was puzzled. It was fine for him to call his father that every day. Qiao Gui spent a lot of effort to fool Honeysuckle away. The main reason was that Honeysuckle still had to continue his exploration, and naturally wouldn't waste too much time here. After satisfying his wish of being called father, He continued to explore the place with a hop and a jump. Chao Gui looked at Ma Hualong with a livid face and cupped his hands. "Brother Ma, please keep this secret." Ma Hualong held back his laughter with great difficulty. He patted Chao Gui's shoulder and said sympathetically, "Actually, it's nothing. If others knew, they would be envious. After all, this is a princess." Before he could finish speaking, Ma Hualong couldn't help but laugh so hard that his teeth were showing. Chao Gui covered his face and wished he could find a hole to hide in. Chapter 1054. The following tour was also an eye-opener for everyone. Guangxia Literature Network. The most central location of this new city was the palace. Outside the square surrounding the palace were the residences of some of the court officials, and further out were the various ministries and departments. Everyone went straight to the east of the city and finally saw what the unfinished construction looked like. Countless tractors and trucks were coming and going on the wide road. A few buildings that were still under construction had huge stone and wooden shelves that hung materials from above. The crowd was scattered everywhere like ants. This scene was so spectacular that even Ren Baqian was a little dazed. It looked very much like a modern construction site, especially those tractors and trucks that were driving on the road. However, modern construction sites weren't so huge. Even Wuxia City wasn't considered much compared to this city. More than 100,000 people were used to build this city. "What's the name of this city?" "The capital," Ren Baqian replied faintly. The other cities that were called the capital were just nicknames. However, this place was different. The name was given by the Empress, and it was called the capital. It was the residence of the emperor, and the capital of the entire human race. When she said this name, the Empress was arrogant and looked down on the world. He had to admit that he liked this domineering attitude of the Empress. Every time he saw her like this, his heart would jump a few times. It was only interesting to have sex with such a woman. Then he would be carried out 7 days later. However, the name the capital was indeed domineering. Even the deans of the various academies were shocked. Ren Baqian stood in the middle of the road, pointed to the magnificent city in front of him, and said to everyone behind him, "This world has changed." These words made everyone's heart jump again, and they secretly wondered what Zhao Prince Consort meant by saying this. The world has changed, and it's changing faster and faster. If you can't keep up with the changes in this world, you will be eliminated. Ren Baqian ignored everyone and just looked ahead. The first to be eliminated were those who couldn't accept new things. Just like on Earth a few decades ago, many people used smartphones, got used to mobile payments, and used to doing everything with their phones. However, many people didn't even know how to use a smartphone. These people were generally elderly. They were gradually falling behind the times. In the decades that followed, the process repeated itself. Cultivation techniques, thinking feedback technology, and all kinds of new technologies were constantly making batch after batch of people unable to keep up with the changes of the times. It would be the same in this world. After sighing, Ren Baqian turned around and smiled at the people behind him. "Do you know? If he wanted to take down Great Xia, he could do it at any time. It's just that it's not necessary. Zhao Prince Consort is right. Even when Great Xia was at its peak, it wouldn't have been able to resist Dayo's army. Furthermore, Great Xia has been through many years of war, the people are suffering, and the national strength is declining," someone immediately said. However, most of these deans still had some integrity and wouldn't flatter him too much. As for what he was thinking, it was hard to say. After all, everyone knew that the Aboriginals didn't have enough officials. The Aboriginals had a small population and few talents. Ren Baqian didn't care what they thought. Back then, the Palace of Heaven wanted to wrap up Great Xia and give it to him. Great Xia, which was regarded as the #1 country in the eyes of others, was more of a burden to him. "Do you know why I invited all of you here?" Ren Baqian always changed the topic after one sentence, which made everyone a little uncomfortable. Everyone felt that Zhao Prince Consort was hinting at something. As for what the hint was, they had to go back and think about it themselves. However, this question wasn't difficult at the moment. "I'm just guessing, but I don't know if it's accurate," someone said. Tell me about it. Renbaqian turned around and looked at everyone with a smile on his face. The Palace of Heaven wants to give these young people a chance. That person continued. Renbaqian laughed. These words were indeed pleasing to the ear. That's right. Give them a chance and give you a chance too. Everyone was slightly stunned. Giving those students a chance was something that everyone understood. However, what did it mean to give them a chance? When you go back, add a literacy course to all of your academies. You will pass down Dayo's simplified Chinese. In the future, most of the books will be written in simplified Chinese. If you can't read and understand books, I'm afraid that it won't be long before you are eliminated from this world. Renbaqian's words made everyone silent. One had to know that the written language wasn't just a carrier for recording, carrying knowledge, and exchanging ideas. It was also the historical heritage of a nation. Did Zhao Prince Consort actually mean that he wanted to change the written language? Your Highness, you can't do that. Even if the dean didn't want to say anything, he had to stop him at this time. Why not? Renbaqian narrowed his eyes, looked at everyone, and said without waiting for them to speak. Is there a need for 2 languages in a country? Unifying the written language and weights is something that must be done. His tone was stern and didn't allow anyone to refuse. In the future, simplified Chinese will be the official language. Newspapers will be in simplified Chinese, and all kinds of official documents will be in simplified Chinese. All kinds of books will also be in simplified Chinese. Physics, chemistry, mathematics, politics, economics, law, manufacturing, agriculture, and everything else will be in simplified Chinese if they don't understand it. What's the difference between the students you teach and the commoners who haven't gone to school? Renbaqian's words made everyone's faces turn pale. Then he softened his tone and said, if you are willing to keep the original written language, that's fine. However, simplified Chinese is more conducive to learning and dissemination, so it must be implemented. After that, Renbaqian didn't say anything else and let everyone think for themselves about what was important. After thinking for a while, he added, in the future, the national exam will also be in simplified Chinese. Everyone was in a mess, but they still perked up after hearing this. Zhao Prince Consort mentioned the national exam. Could it be that he was going to hold the national exam? The Yun nation had been gone for 6.5 years. During these 6.5 years, the students of the academy didn't have any way to advance, and could only work for the Chamber of Commerce or be an advisor to some officials. However, it would be different if the national exam was held. They could enter the imperial court and become officials. In about 2 or 3 years, the national exam will be held again. After that, the imperial court will issue a document. Furthermore, it's not limited to men or women. Even women can participate as long as they are knowledgeable enough, Renbaqian said. The last sentence was specially said to the dean of Jitai Academy. As for Jitai Academy, he was still rather optimistic about it. After returning to Lan City that day, many students heard the news that the national exam was about to be held again, and were very excited. In any case, as long as the national exam was held, they would have a chance. Otherwise, no matter how knowledgeable they were, they wouldn't be able to advance. In particular, the many women of Jitai Academy were excited when they heard the news. Other than in the palace, there were no precedents of female officials in the Yun nation. Even if they were successful in their studies, they would only be able to manage their family's business after they got married. However, Zhao Prince Consort's words gave them hope. Furthermore, they weren't worried that Zhao Prince Consort's words were false. In Dayo's imperial court, it wasn't uncommon for women to become officials. In fact, there were even women who became generals. As for learning simplified Chinese, they didn't have as big of a reaction as the dean. Many people were also very interested in the strange things in Black Bamboo Academy. Chapter 1055. You are the pride of your respective academies, and have left a good impression on me over the past few days. I want to ask if you are willing to work for the imperial court. Renbaqian sat on a chair at the top of the hall, and looked down at the crowd. There were a total of 33 people standing below, all of whom had performed well in the previous exams and lectures. Of course, There were more than a few of these talents among the hundreds of people, but they should be the most outstanding batch. Although there were still some who were overlooked, Ren Baqian didn't have much energy to filter them out. This student is willing. Everyone's faces lit up with joy, and they answered without hesitation. If they weren't willing, they wouldn't have appeared here. They weren't idiots from Wangjing Academy who had studied too much. There were several ways to become an official in this era. The first way was to take part in the major examination, which hadn't been held for 6.5 years. Although Zhao Prince Consort said that there would be a major examination, there were still 2 to 3 years left. Moreover, the major examination didn't mean that there wouldn't be any talents. Therefore, there were 2 other ways: recommendation and guidance. Recommendation was from the bottom up. Of course, this method also required a certain level of authority, at least officials or celebrities. Guidance was from the top down. However, during this period, there was no way to pass the major examination, and no way to recommend. After all, the Aboriginals didn't care about celebrities, and the warlords didn't have any intention of recommending them. Rinpoche's guidance was their only chance. According to the usual practice, people who were promoted usually had a tag on them. They were promoted by Zhao Prince Consort, so they were naturally labeled as his subordinates. It could be said that in Dayo, besides the Empress, this was the thickest thigh. Rinpoche nodded. He wasn't surprised that these students were sensible. It would be strange if they refused. Go back and learn simplified Chinese first. If you want to work in the imperial court in the future, you won't be able to do so. Rinpoche laughed. Yes. Rinpoche met these students and allowed them to wander around Lan City for 2 days before letting them return to the Yun Nation. Learning Chinese wasn't something that could be done overnight, and would take at least half a year. After that, these 30 people would be scattered to places that needed manpower, but it would only be a drop in the bucket. After annexing the Yun Nation, there had been a shortage of officials. Many new departments, such as the Department of Commerce, had been severely understaffed for several years. When the people of the Yun Nation left, 2 young women arrived at Lan City on a train. This thing is really interesting. Furthermore, it's so stable. It's much more comfortable than a horse carriage. One of the women exclaimed. Sitting in front of her was a woman in Taoist robes. She was holding a thermos cup with scented tea in it, looking like she was in good health. These 2 people were naturally Lin Yu and Li Yuanju. Among them, Li Yuanju was already in her 30s, and Lin Yu was even older. Lin Yu and Lin Yu and Lin Yu. With their strength, they would be able to maintain this appearance for at least a few decades. Li Yuanju ignored Lin Yu. She held her thermos flask and took sips from time to time. Lin Yin Yin, and said they would like to drink. Not only did he buy a thermos cup, but he also bought an aluminum container, toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, sunglasses. When Rinpoche heard that an old friend had come to see him, he was a little curious. When he saw the 2 of them, he laughed and said, "So it's you, Jinren Li. It's been several years since we last met, but the 2 of you are still as elegant as ever. How have you been, Zhao Prince Consort?" She had a faint smile on her face. Rinpoche smiled as he welcomed the 2 of them in, and asked someone to serve them tea. Then he asked about the purpose of her visit and said, "Jinren Li has been busy with Great Xiao's society recently. I often hear about your elegant demeanor, but I haven't had the chance to meet you. How did you find the time to meet an old friend?" "I came here to meet an old friend and to hear your Highness's opinion on the painting screen Sword House, the Pilheart sect, the Gyuanfang boat, and the other sections." Li Yuanju didn't beat around the bush and went straight to the point. He already knew about the screen painting tower, the Pilheart sect, and the other sects, as well as the group of experts. Adding all these people together, there were more than 20 people on the ranking list. There were also disciples from several sects, adding up to a few thousand people. Now they were the second strongest force after the Return Home organization. Currently, there were no neutral experts in the Jianghu of Great Xia. They had either joined the Go Home organization or formed an alliance with sects like the Painted Screen Sword Tower. Jinren Li and the other experts have already become the general trend. They are just like mantises trying to stop a chariot. Rinpoche said faintly. Li Yuanju put down the tea and said softly, With so many people, there will definitely be casualties if we fight. Even if we destroy the painting screen sword tower, the casualties will be irreversible. Besides, if these people can join the organization, they will also be new blood. Jinren is thinking about them, but they might not be thinking about you. Renbaqian laughed. When he saw Li Yuanju previously, he had already guessed her intentions. Now, it seemed that it was just as he had guessed. They are the foundation of the human race, Li Yuanju said. There are hundreds of millions of people in the human race, and there will always be geniuses. Back then, Su Wuming killed a large number of experts, but experts like Zhenren Li, Zi Xiao, Lin Dong, and Ting Yu appeared. The human race doesn't lack geniuses, but geniuses lack opportunities. Renbaqian's words hit the nail on the head. The human race lacked geniuses? Were the geniuses of the human race limited to these people on the ranking list? Who knew how many geniuses were buried in the wilderness? As for those people, since they had chosen to be enemies, what could they do even if they were strong? Li Yuanju was silent. What Renbaqian said was right, but since these people had come this far, they must have had both talent and opportunity. How difficult was it? It would be a pity if all of them died. Renbaqian smiled and sighed. However, since Zhenren Li is here, I will give them a chance. Li Yuanju looked up at him and asked, "What did Zhao Prince Consort say?" "They are all here now, right? I will get someone to set off fireworks for them later. If they are still stubborn, we will plant mushrooms on their heads." Li Yuanju pondered over the meaning of Renbaqian's words, and didn't quite understand. After thinking for a while, she found some clues and smiled. That's good too. In any case, she had fought for a chance for them. In addition, I am also very interested in the current princess. I have never heard of someone who was an Earthwill expert at birth. That's easy. Lu Hua's talent had not only spread throughout Dayo but also reached the ears of many experts in Great Xia. Li Yuanju wasn't the only one who was interested. There is one more thing. Recently, an ancient tomb was discovered. It should have been left behind from that period. I wonder if Zhao Prince Consort is interested? Li Yuanju's last matter finally caught Renbaqian's attention. An ancient tomb from that period? How could he not be interested? How did you find it? Is there any trouble? Renbaqian didn't think that Lin Yu was just asking him. If there wasn't any trouble, Li Yuanju wouldn't be asking about it. Instead, she would be bringing something from the tomb. At this point, Lin Yu finally woke up from her dream and said, "So it's Zhao Prince Consort." Renbaqian was speechless. "Girl, is your brain still not working properly?" Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. Yen. Chapter 1056. The tragedy was that I was still drinking with my wife outside. My wife was fine, I was much better. The Empress's Gigolo Valentine's Day currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1057. Have you been together for the past 4 years? Renbaqian raised his eyebrows. It was a pity that he didn't have eyebrows. Yes. Li Yuanju's gaze changed slightly. She glanced at Lin Yu and seemed to want to sigh. Can her brain be saved? Renbaqian asked curiously. It's up to her. Li Yuanju lowered her eyelids again and held a thermos flask. Her posture was just short of stuffing some wolfberries into it. Has your brain gone bad from practicing martial arts? Has it gone berserk? Renbaqian didn't avoid Lin Yu at all, and directly asked her about her brain. In any case, she wouldn't be able to react in time. It should be a problem with her martial arts, Li Yuanju said. My men didn't find any news about her, which isn't a big deal. After all, we don't have many people in Great Xia. However, with her brain, why did she join in the fun in the first place? Renbaqian was still a little curious about Lin Yu. He didn't expect Lin Yu to react so quickly this time. She suddenly said, "Your brain isn't working well." This surprised Renbaqian and asked, how did she come back to her senses so quickly this time? In the end, Lin Yu didn't move again. It's not that her brain isn't working well, but that her consciousness always seems to be wandering. Although she seems to be able to walk, there's nothing wrong with her other than her slow reaction. Li Yuanzhu explained and made an analogy. It's as if her consciousness is often not in her body, and there's a certain delay in the transmission of her emotions and words. As for her body, it's completely controlled by her instincts. Of course, this is just an analogy. The actual situation is more complicated than that. Ren Baqian thought about it carefully. If he were to describe it, it would be like Lin Yu's consciousness was in the United States, but her body was in China. The communication between them was through dial-up, so her reaction was always slow. From time to time, she would even experience disconnection. He looked strangely at Lin Yu, who was deep in thought, and changed the topic to what Li Yuanzhu had just said. What's the specific situation of the ancient tomb that you mentioned just now? The ancient tomb was discovered by Lin Dong. It is said that he found it by following some clues in the ancient books. You know, Reicha's sect has a long history, and many unknown things have been passed down in the sect. The information about this tomb was like this. It was hidden in some ancient books. After Cult Master Lin went back last time, he spent a few years and a lot of manpower to find clues about this tomb from the ancient books. After finding it, sect leader Lin brought people to check it out and confirmed the location of the tomb. However, sect master Lin and the rest are blocked outside. Although they know the location, they haven't made any progress in half a year. Lin Dong did not enter. Ren Baqian was a little astonished. One must know that Lin Dong was one of the top 10 experts in the world. Furthermore, there were also many top-notch experts in Reicha's sect. Even though Reicha's sect didn't have a good reputation, it was a famous sect in Great Xia and could mobilize a lot of power. But this kind of power could not even enter an ancient tomb? Li Yuanzhu lowered her eyes and said, I personally went to the tomb after receiving the news. Unfortunately, I also stopped outside the tomb. This time, Ren Baqian was even more astonished. Li Yuanzhu, the second most powerful expert in the world, Lin Dong, the 10th most powerful expert in the world, and a group of experts from Reicha's sect were actually blocked outside the tomb. How did they do it? Even an impenetrable wall couldn't stop this group of experts. What exactly is going on? After entering the range of that ancient tomb, one will encounter an illusion, just like the one in the tomb below the palace. It's difficult to get rid of it, and when one wakes up, one will already be outside the tomb. This is the case no matter how many times one tries. If one is weak and tries a few more times, it will cause damage to one's divine sense. Sect leader Lin and I speculate that one must at least reach the heaven-splitting region in order to pass through that illusion. Ren Baqian raised his eyebrows. The illusion below the tomb in the palace could only be seen the first time one entered. This one was actually different. Fortunately, it was left behind by a senior human, so there wasn't any danger. However, this also showed one thing. The other party hoped that someone could enter, which meant that there was something important inside. Who is the owner of the ancient tomb? Ren Baqian pondered for a while and asked. It was only the other party's guess that they could enter the heaven-splitting region. It was best to know the identity of the tomb owner, and perhaps find another way. He was getting more and more curious about this tomb. Dekan. Li Yuanzhu looked at Ren Baqian's eyes when she said this name. Human Emperor? Ren Baqian raised his voice and looked incredulous. This name made it difficult for him to maintain his original calm. Before the human race was driven here, there were 5 human emperors, each in charge of a region. 4 of them had died in the previous war. It was because of the existence of this human emperor that the foreign races, who could no longer bear the heavy casualties, signed an agreement with the human race and drove them to this land of exile. It could be said that without Dekan, the human race in this world would have been extinct. However, there was very little information about Dekan. In the 2 records left behind by the owner of the tomb under the palace, his name was only mentioned slightly. He didn't expect to hear news about Dekan at this time. He didn't expect Lin Dong to actually find Dekan's tomb. If Lin Dong's information is correct, it should be this human emperor. The outermost defense of the tomb is so powerful, so it's very likely that it's him. Li Yuanzhu nodded. Ren Baqian couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up and walked around a few times before looking up and asking, Do you know what's inside the tomb? I don't know. Li Yuanju shook her head slightly. Regardless of whether he knew or not, the tomb left behind by the human emperor had to be explored. No matter what was inside, it would be a huge gain. Renbaqian naturally understood this. After walking around a few times, he said, Jinren and Lin Yueyuan must be tired. Take a rest first. I'll go see Her Majesty. Li Yuanju got up and left after telling him the news she brought. Renbaqian arranged for her and Lin Yu to rest before hurrying to see the Empress. Li Yuanju's target wasn't the Empress, who was only about as strong as her. Her target was Li Fu. Although he hadn't admitted it, everyone thought that he had broken through to the spirit will level and reached the heaven and earth level. Among the human race, he was the only one who had the opportunity to pass through the barrier formed by the illusion. This was probably the purpose of the human emperor, setting up this barrier. If someone who was too weak obtained the things and information in the tomb, it would be harmful to the human race. Only those who had reached the lowest level of strength that he recognized could enter the tomb. The Empress was in a side palace hall. All the items in the side palace hall had been moved to the side of the wall. On the ground, rows of wooden rectangular dominoes were arranged densely. The Empress was looking at Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan carefully placing the dominoes at the edge. The three of them were playing dominoes. The dominoes were made up of red and white. After they were pushed over, they would form a red background with the word, Empress, written in white. Renbaqian knew this very well, because he was the one who drew the blueprint of the dominoes. When he arrived, Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were squatting on the ground with dominoes in their hands. They were carefully visiting the tomb with sweat dripping down their foreheads. If they accidentally touched one or the dominoes they placed fell over, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Renbaqian slowed down and tried not to disturb them. He walked to the Empress's side, gently massaged her shoulders and softly said, Li Yuanju is here. The Empress raised her eyebrows and asked in a cold voice, What is she doing here? She still hadn't let go of the fact that Renbaqian had been arrested. Moreover, why did she come to see you instead of me? Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Chapter 1058. I'm afraid that your Majesty doesn't want to see her. Renbaqian pinched the Empress's shoulders. Although the strength of his hands didn't affect the Empress much, she still enjoyed their time together. The Empress snorted. She naturally wouldn't think too much about it. If it were someone else, regardless of whether there was hatred or not, given their status, they would have come to see her directly. However, Li Yuanju's actions were a little surprising. She went to look for Renbaqian and let him reconcile the resentment she had for her. She was obviously the second most powerful expert in the world, but she put on a low front. This was something that others couldn't do. After all, she was one of the top figures in the world and had a high status even in the martial arts world. Even the imperial court of Great Xia didn't dare to slight her. Speaking of which, I find it a little strange. In Great Xia, the most active person was Blood Sea Demon. However, with the fall of the Tianmen sect, Blood Sea Demon wasn't that interested, even though he was still a relatively active expert. In the past 2 years, Zhenrenli has been the one who has contributed the most. Renbaqian said softly. Experts like these all had their own status. Even in the face of such a major event involving the entire human race, it was reasonable to say that the most responsible experts should be the most active. In the end, Li Yuanju, who was indifferent and otherworldly, contributed the most. Even Renbaqian was surprised. It didn't match her image all along. She didn't seek fame or profit, and she had the attitude of, I'm a brick in the revolution, and I'll move wherever needed. Renbaqian even wanted to award her a model worker, or a red banner bearer. Renbaqian chatted with the Empress for a while before telling her the purpose of her visit. The Emperor's tomb? The Empress's expression turned solemn when she heard this term. Everyone understood the meaning and importance of these words. Even the Empress didn't care about Renbaqian's arrest anymore. We have to go in and retrieve the things inside, the Empress said as she pressed on Renbaqian's hand. If there were things left behind by Deakin in the tomb, it would be of great significance to the current human race. That's for sure. Renbaqian naturally knew that the things had to be retrieved, and he even wanted to go there himself. After all, the things in Decan's tomb were too important. However, thinking about the matters at hand made him a little troubled. He had too many things on hand, and he couldn't let them go. Although being at the top of a country was the same as being at the top of a company, he couldn't have everything in his hands. However, there were too few aboriginals who could shoulder the burden. If it was a fight, a bunch of burly men would jump out and shout, "I want to fight 10 of you." However, in other aspects, they were far too lacking. "I'll go personally." The Empress spoke first while he was still mulling over the arrangements at hand. This matter was worthy of her making a personal trip. Renbachian thought about it carefully and said, "The tomb won't run away even if it's there. It will still take several decades or even a century for us to walk out of this place. There's no rush." Only God knew what was inside the tomb after passing through the barrier. Although it seemed that the arrangement of the human sovereign would not cause much harm to the intruders, it was hard to say after passing through the barrier. Only he could use technological items according to the situation at the scene. However, he couldn't leave now, so he'd better put the matter of the tomb of the human sovereign aside and go there when he was free. Anyway, a year and a half wouldn't make much of a difference. "You don't believe me?" The Empress grabbed Renbachian's collar and pulled him down. Renbachian's head fell on the sofa, and his head happened to be on the Empress's lap. He twisted his body like a worm and found a comfortable position. "It's not that I don't believe you, but there's no need. Speaking of which, I haven't traveled with your Majesty for a long time. This time, we're going abroad again. Wouldn't it be better for the two of us to travel together?" Renbachian said while enjoying the Empress's lap pillow. After hearing what Renbachian said, the Empress was obviously tempted. If everything could be arranged properly, it wouldn't be a bad idea for the two of them to go sightseeing along the way. Although the tomb of the human sovereign was very important, as he said, it couldn't run away. The Empress thought for a while and said, "We still have to bring Yu Qing along. It would be hard to rest along the way if they brought her along. However, if they left her behind, she would turn the palace upside down." At the mention of Lu Hua, Renbachian frowned a little. She could never calm down, and he even suspected that she had ADHD. After some discussion, the two of them decided on this matter. Renbachian would first busy himself with the matters at hand, and find time to go to Great Xia after a few months. "Let her come to the banquet tonight," the Empress said lazily. Although he still didn't like Li Yuanju, with her status, he had to treat her to a banquet. In addition to Li Yuanju, Lin Yu and Li Fu were also at the banquet. After Renbachian told him about the tomb of the human sovereign, Li Fu couldn't sit still, and was even more anxious than Renbachian and the Empress. However, Renbachian made up his mind to go to the tomb a few months later. Li Yuanju finally met Qi Yuqing. She was only 3 years old, but she looked like a 7 or 8-year-old child. Her eyes were very lively, and her eyeballs were always rolling around, making her look very clever. The most important thing was her strength. She was at the intermediate level of the Earth Will level, just like the rumors said. Li Yuanju liked her when she saw her. With a flick of her finger, a short wooden sword landed in front of Lu Hua. Lu Hua was a little disgusted and said in a childish voice, "It's too small." This sword was suitable for a 3 or 4-year-old child, but it was too small for her, so she wasn't interested in it. "Hold it in your hand and keep it in your heart," Li Yuanju said with a smile. Renbachian recalled the sword that he had thrown to the laboratory of the Messier 87 department back then. "Thank you, Zhenren," Renbachian immediately said. "It's all right. I obtained it by chance these days, and it's of no use to me," Li Yuanju said. The Empress was expressionless. She was using her bare hands and wasn't going to let Lu Hua learn swordsmanship. This kind of skillful weapon wasn't suitable for the aboriginals, and was just a toy. Lu Hua thought about it and picked up the sword. It grew from 40 centimeters to 90 centimeters in her hand, which was just right for her. Not only did it grow longer, wider, and thicker, but even the hilt became thicker. Lu Hua's eyes were filled with joy, and she immediately fell in love with this new toy. Renbachian narrowed his eyes. It was just as he had expected. However, the next moment, the sword in Lu Hua's hand grew several times larger. She had to hold the hilt with both hands, and the sword was more than 4 meters long. Rinpoche immediately knew that this sword was many times stronger than the one he had obtained in the past. After a discussion with Rinpoche and the Empress, Li Yuanzhu bade them farewell, and left Lan City by train the next day. She was very interested in this new means of transportation. Rinpoche and Li Yuanzhu agreed to send someone to the Huaping Sword Tower to drop a nuclear bomb 3 months later. If they still refused to come to their senses, the nuclear bomb would be dropped on their heads. As for Rinpoche himself, he invited many chambers of commerce and families to visit the capital. On one hand, he wanted to sell them houses, but most importantly, he needed these chambers of commerce and families to open shops in the capital to make the capital prosperous. 3 months passed in a flash, and all the chambers of commerce and families in the Yun nation opened new shops in the capital. At the same time, hundreds of villages from the 60,000 mountains, nearly 100,000 aboriginals, 30,000 households from Tianjing Basin, and 150,000 Jing tribe people all moved to the capital. Lan City began to get busy in preparation for the relocation of the capital. It would take 3 months just to move the capital. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1059. As soon as he returned to the palace, he heard a deafening wail. Doubtlessly, Honeysuckle was beaten up again. Furthermore, the Empress did it personally. It was much more painful than doing it himself. He was already used to such daily occurrences. With Erhua's naughtiness, she would definitely not be wronged if she were to be beaten up 3 times in the morning. Following the sound, she found her way to the Ordnance Palace. It was the palace where Erhua lived. As soon as she stepped outside, she found out why she was beaten. The courtyard was in a mess. All the flowers and trees were chopped off at a height of 1 meter. Broken branches and leaves were everywhere. It was as if a war had taken place here. With a quick glance, all the cuts were very smooth, as if they had been cut by a sharp weapon. When he entered the hall, he saw Erhua lying on one side and sobbing. The wooden sword had shrunk to its smallest size, and was thrown aside like a child's toy. Upon hearing Rinpoche's footsteps, Erhua raised her head and looked at Rinpoche like a kitten. She wanted to complain, but after thinking that her father couldn't defeat the Empress, and that it might turn into a mixed-gender fight, she gave up on this idea. The Empress was sitting on Erhua's bed, drinking wine from time to time. From time to time, she would glance at Erhua with a sharp gaze. It was like a scene of domestic violence. "Why are you drinking alcohol?" Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was understandable that she would hit a child while eating, sleeping, and so on. It was understandable that the Empress would beat the child herself. However, it was more interesting to drink while beating a child. "I'm thirsty after fighting for so long." The Empress glared at Lu Hua again. "So what if it's torn down? Whose child doesn't tear down the roof tiles? Furthermore, the capital is going to be moved soon." Rinpoche consoled her. Although that was the case, most naughty children had the heart to climb up the roof and tear down the tiles, but they didn't have the strength. Lu Hua not only had the heart, but he also had the strength. "Not only did she demolish Ordnance Palace, but she also chopped down my tree," the Empress said gloomily. "Which tree?" "Candy tree." Even though the candy tree was empty most of the time, the Empress still planted it in front of the palace hall. Even after changing palaces several times, the candy tree was still the same. When Rinpoche had the time, he would also hang candies on the candy tree. Every time, the Empress would think of the time before they got married. Then she would take a pair of scissors and cut off all the candies. This was a bit of fun between the two of them, especially since Rinpoche was getting busier and busier recently. "Your Majesty, why don't you wait for my return before we discuss this?" Rinpoche felt a little regretful. "Why would I wait for you to come back?" The Empress rolled her eyes. "Let's beat her together. Now that you're done, I can't do it." Immediately, Erhua stopped crying. She raised her head and looked at Rinpoche with grief and indignation. "Are you two biological parents? I want to leave home. I want to leave home. Never to see father and mother Empress again. The outside world is so big, I want to see it too. I'll come back when you know you're wrong." Erhua rolled his eyes and made up his mind to run away from home. He was thinking about what he should do. Although he was only a 3-year-old child, he was usually more mischievous than a naughty child and lacked common sense, but his mind was still quite full of ideas. Naturally, the two of them didn't know what she was planning. Seeing her eyes rolling, they knew what she was planning. After the capital is moved, let her attend cultural classes, Renbachian said to the Empress. The kindergarten on Earth had already been set up, but he had too many things to do recently. He decided to send her there only after the capital was moved. At the same time, the palace would arrange for teachers to teach her. After that, there would be a kindergarten for the children of the court officials. Renbachian planned to let her attend 3 classes. 14 days of school in a week. It was too cruel for a 3-year-old child. It was better to let her attend 13 days of school. The Empress also felt that it was time for her to learn something, so she nodded in agreement. Afterward, the two of them discussed the relocation of the capital as they walked. Many things had already begun to be prepared. For example, the Aboriginals and the 100,000 Jing tribe people who had moved out of the 60,000 mountains were gradually moving to the capital. After the two of them left, Erhua got up quickly. There were no longer any tears in her eyes, but they were still a little red. Over the past few years, 2 flowers had not mastered anything else, but the ability to cry at the drop of a hat. Where should I run away from home? I definitely can't do it in this city. If I'm discovered, they will inform Father and Mother Empress. Those people aren't reliable at all. Erhua thought to herself. Although she was only 3 years old, she wasn't stupid. Her intelligence was at least equivalent to that of a 7- or 8-year-old child. It was just that she was inexperienced and didn't understand many things. However, with her pitiful little experience, she quickly found a feasible way. The steam train. As long as she sat on it, she would be able to run very far away. Furthermore, she still remembered the way. After recalling the way to take the steam train, Erhua sat there thoughtfully and began to think about what to bring with her when she ran away from home. Those air-dried rats and birds, as well as sweets and honey. Erhua's mind was filled with food. As for money, she still didn't have any concept of it. In any case, others would treat her to meals and drinks. After knowing where to go and what to bring, she had to consider when to leave and how to knock Zhuhua out. From the perspective of a 3-year-old or even a 7- or 8-year-old child, Erhua was already very thorough. Although she was beaten up every day, who asked her to be so mischievous? Most of the time, she simply didn't care if she would be beaten up for what she was about to do. After making up her mind, Erhua prepared a small bag for the next 2 days. In fact, it was the stomach of a type of strange beast. When it was shrunk, it could be placed in one's sleeve and could expand very much after storing things. When Zhuhua wasn't paying attention, Erhua stuffed the bag with her snacks and sweets, and then tied it up and hid it. On the 3rd night, Honeysuckle smashed a metal vase on the back of Zhuhua's head when she wasn't paying attention. The vase was dented, and Zhuhua fainted. She didn't expect to fall into Honeysuckle's trap again, and be defeated by Honeysuckle. Then Erhua hung her wooden sword on her waist, carried the bag, and sneaked out of the palace. After being in the palace for so long, she was already very clear about the routes and timings of the Imperial Guards. As long as she had the intention, it wasn't difficult at all. After sneaking out of the palace, Erhua was immediately in a good mood, and felt that she could fly freely in the vast sky. The next step was to take a train. This wasn't too difficult for her. With her skills, she could even sneak out of the palace, so sneaking out of Lawn City was even easier. After finding the right direction, she left the city and followed the cement road to find the train station. Then she found a train and sneaked onto it. Nowadays, there weren't many trains from Lawn City to the Yun Nation. There were only 6 trains a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 1 in the evening. This train happened to leave the next morning. In the morning, someone discovered that Zhuhua had been knocked out, and that the little princess had disappeared. Suddenly, the entire palace was in an uproar, and the entire Lawn City was searched. At this time, no one expected that Erhua had already boarded a train to the Yun Nation. First, set a small target, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1060. I won't explain any further. Tonight, the updates will resume as per normal. 2 chapters as a foundation, 3 chapters later. The pretty boy of the Empress's family will resume updating tonight. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1061. Lawn City, the Palace. Renbaqian's face was very ugly. He thought that Hua Er had gone out to play again. This wasn't the first time this had happened, so he wasn't too worried. Even after Zhu Hua woke up and found out that she had been knocked out in the middle of the night, he still felt the same. However, after searching Lawn City for 4 hours without finding any trace of Hua Er, his face began to turn ugly. Not only were the palace guards mobilized, but the Public Order Bureau and the Department of Inspection were also mobilized. Under such circumstances, Hua Er was nowhere to be found after 4 hours, which could only mean one thing: she was no longer in Lawn City. He glanced at Zhu Hua, who still looked like a retard. That metal vase weighed 30 to 40 kilograms, and Hua Er didn't know how to control her strength and almost smashed her into an idiot. It seemed like someone else would have to look after Hua Er. Renbaqian rubbed his forehead. The most important thing now was to find Hua Er. There were 3 gates in Lawn City, but Hua Er definitely didn't leave through the city gates since the city walls couldn't stop her. Where would she go? The most likely place was where he had taken her. Mount Zhongshi's laboratory, the imperial capital, and the Yin nation. Given Hua Er's liking for fun, she was most likely heading east. Nowadays, there were 200 to 300 tractors and trucks heading from Lawn City to the Yin nation every day. Hua Er could hide in any of the vehicles and reach the Yin nation. Renbaqian got up to look for the Empress. He needed the Empress's warrant to mobilize the winged cavalry, so he ordered them to search in 4 directions. At the same time, he had to call Zidonglai and ask him to arrange for people to search the Yin nation. To be precise, they had to search Yonggua, Yujiang, and Pingdu with these 3 cities as the center. The highway would pass through these 3 cities and end in Pingdu. The train also had stations in these 3 cities. At this time, Renbaqian didn't expect Hua Er to sneak onto the train. After all, the train station was located in a remote place outside the city, and Renbaqian felt that it was most likely that she had sneaked into one of the trucks. However, just in case, he still asked someone to contact the people on the train that had already left and search the train. After making these arrangements, Renbaqian had to wait for news in the palace. He was a little worried. Although Hua Er was at the Kismet Heaven level, she hadn't learned any martial arts and was far from being a match for an Earth-level expert. In addition, she had never been outside and could be deceived with just a few words. If she encountered a bad person, she would probably suffer a lot. At this time, Honeysuckle was surrounded by neatly arranged straw sacks. Only the top of his head could see the light. The environment wasn't very good, but she didn't care. Her face was still full of excitement. She grabbed a dried bird from the bag and started to chew on it. Even the bones were crushed and swallowed. Just now he was hiding in an empty soft sleeper compartment, but someone checked and he was almost discovered. She ran along the roof of the car and finally into this container. The container was filled with bags of sweet potatoes, which filled up more than half of the truck. Hua threw a few bags of sweet potatoes to the side and made a nest. Honeysuckle sat there for a day and a night, stopping a few times in between. Every time, Honeysuckle would stick his head out to look. The next morning, Honeysuckle saw a lot of people getting off the train and walking out. Some people even opened the boxes on the side to move goods down. He was immediately tempted. She didn't know where she wanted to go, so she would go wherever others went. Hua found an opportunity to sneak off the train when no one was paying attention. Then he followed the crowd and snuck out. However, as soon as he slipped out, he was targeted. Princess. A group of soldiers recognized Honeysuckle at a glance. After all, she was only wearing the same clothes. Furthermore, her figure was special and much more muscular than ordinary people. Even though most of it was covered by the clothes, it could still be seen if one looked carefully. Those who didn't know better might think that she was wearing soft armor underneath, but it couldn't be more obvious in the eyes of those who knew. Honeysuckle looked blankly at the people in front of her, and didn't know what they were going to do. "Princess, please come back with us." A captain smiled warmly at Honeysuckle. Unexpectedly, Honeysuckle's expression changed drastically. She punched him in the eye and ran away at an extremely fast speed. Even an ordinary horse couldn't catch up to her, let alone an ordinary soldier. However, her destination was immediately seen by others. It was Yujiang City. Renbaqian received a call from the Protectorate of the Northeast, and was relieved to hear that they had found traces of Honeysuckle. "Where is she now?" "In Yujiang City. My men have found traces of her, but they are still following her for fear that she will run away again." Zidonglai's voice came from the other end of the line. "Thank you." Renbaqian thought for a while and said, "Let the experts keep an eye on her. As long as she isn't hurt, I will set off immediately." After hanging up, Renbaqian finally felt a little more relaxed. He had finally found that girl. Although he wanted to catch her back, he wasn't in a hurry. It would be fine as long as someone kept an eye on her, and didn't let her get hurt. Although he was angry that she ran away without permission, he could rest assured that she was safe now that he had found her. He would take this opportunity to make her suffer a little and learn a lesson. Renbaqian headed to the bedroom. At present, the sky above the palace seemed to be covered by dark clouds. Not only was it pressing down on the palace, but it was also pressing down on everyone's hearts. Everyone in the palace didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Renbaqian ignored this oppressive atmosphere and walked into the bedroom. He didn't beat around the bush and said, "I found her. She's in Yujiang City." She knew that the Empress was also very worried. She could tell from her aura that was pressing down on the entire palace. "Let Zidonglai catch her back. I will teach her a good lesson," the Empress said through gritted teeth. However, she withdrew the terrifying aura that was pressing down on everyone's hearts. Qingyuan and Hongwan finally felt a little more relaxed. It was very frightening to be around such an Empress. "There's no hurry. Let her suffer a little outside and suffer a little. I will set off now to bring her back," Renbaqian said. After Renbaqian finished speaking, he added, "Even if you come back, don't beat me up anymore. This little girl has her own ideas and might even run away from home again." The Empress snorted and didn't refute him. "Punish her with writing essays for a month to hone her temperament, such as the 1,000-character classic, the 3-character classic, and the poems of the Tang and Song dynasties. Go and come back quickly." The Empress waved her hand unhappily. "Got it. I will be back soon." Renbaqian leaned over and kissed the Empress's red lips. It was slightly cold and soft, and a delicate fragrance assailed his nostrils. At this time, Erhua had already arrived in Yujiang City. He was excited to see the streets full of pedestrians and unfamiliar shops. He ran and jumped around the streets of Yujiang City. Erhua carried his bag of snacks. The bag, which was originally as tall as a person, was more than half empty. He couldn't bear to eat it, but he smelled the aroma coming from the restaurant next door, and went in without thinking. "Young lady, how many people?" The child stretched his head and looked behind Erhua. "Just me." Erhua found a table by the window and looked expectant. "What delicious food and wine do you have here? Bring them all up." The waiter sized her up. She wasn't an ordinary child and wondered which family she was from. However, he didn't pay much attention to her. This kind of young lady who sneaked out to play definitely wasn't here to eat and dash. "All right, set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, booksellers." Chapter 1062. It didn't take long for 3 dishes and 1 soup to be placed in front of Honeysuckle. Although she said that all the delicious dishes would be served, her son wouldn't be so stupid as to do that. Although the amount of food wasn't big enough, it was enough for 2 people, only for ordinary people. There was a plate of fish, half a bird, a plate of ingredients, and a bowl of soup. In addition, there was also a pot of 100-flower wine. Honeysuckle was also hungry. She quickly cleaned half of the table, and then burst into tears. This time, not only the people in the restaurant, but even the street was alarmed. Thinking about it, such a beautiful girl was already very attractive, but then she burst into tears in the middle of eating, and her voice was very loud. The shopkeeper and the waiter were sweating profusely. "Little girl, what's wrong? Don't cry first." "It hurts." Honeysuckle pointed at her throat. Her eyes were red, and tears fell down. The shopkeeper looked at her. What was going on? Looking at the little girl's clothes and appearance, she definitely wasn't from an ordinary family. If something happened to her in the restaurant, her family wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility. "Go, invite the doctor from Daiji Hall over," the shopkeeper hurriedly said. Daiji Hall was only 3 shops away from this restaurant, so it was very close. Everyone looked at the table as if it had been swept by a gust of wind. How many minutes had it been? Half of the table was empty. Looking at the remaining half of the fish and the little girl's appearance, someone tentatively said, "Little girl, did the fish bone pierce your throat?" Hearing this, many people felt that this was the case. They immediately laughed and said, "Little girl, you haven't eaten fish before?" Yujiang City was close to Yujiang and was rich in Yuhu fish, so there weren't many people who hadn't eaten fish before. Honeysuckle continued to cry. What was fish? She had never eaten fish before. Although the fish bone wasn't hard, her mouth could withstand it, but her esophagus couldn't, and was immediately pierced. The waiter brought a doctor in his 40s. After asking about the situation, the doctor was also a little speechless. He asked Honeysuckle to open her mouth and poke the back of her throat with a chopstick. Honeysuckle felt uncomfortable, and then directly punched the doctor more than a meter away. "Why are you hitting people?" The shopkeeper was shocked. Honeysuckle couldn't care less about what he said. He bent over and began to retch, spitting out everything he had eaten. Even the fish bones were gone. Honeysuckle finally felt a little better. The shop was in chaos. Honeysuckle's punch caused the doctor to spit out a mouthful of blood. Everyone was aghast. The little girl looked to be 7 or 8 years old, and looked like a porcelain doll. Her hands were so strong. The waiter and the shopkeeper hurriedly sent the doctor back to the pharmacy. When the shopkeeper returned, he saw that Honeysuckle had already changed a table, and was slamming the table at him. "Bring out the good dishes and wine. I don't want the one just now." Honeysuckle felt bad that he had to spit out the food he had just eaten, but he was also scared of the fish. He did not forget to ask the shopkeeper to give him something to eat and drink. The shopkeeper's face darkened. "Little girl, why are you hitting people? He even injured the doctor. In other words, you'll have to pay up." Honeysuckle was at a loss and felt wronged. "He poked me with his chopsticks and made me uncomfortable." "He's treating you. Didn't you get poked by the fish bone? He's helping you get the fish bone out." The shopkeeper looked at Honeysuckle carefully, and realized that she did not seem to be pretending. She really did not seem to be very sensible. Looking at her age, it seemed that she had been spoiled since she was young and did not understand these things. Being poked in the back of the throat with chopsticks was a bit of a reaction. Then he sighed. "Forget it. From the looks of it, Dr. Liu needs to rest for a few days. Pay up and I won't report this to the authorities." Honeysuckle continued to be at a loss. She did not understand most of it, but she did understand one thing. She seemed to have injured that person, but she had used so much strength to play with the Roaring Emperor, and the Roaring Emperor was not injured. Good food, good wine. Honeysuckle's heart was most concerned about this matter. Seeing that she was not in a good mood, the shopkeeper did not say much. He thought that it would be enough to let the little girl pay up later. The main thing was that the little girl had injured that person with a punch. It made him realize that the other party was not only from a rich family, but also a martial arts practitioner. He did not want to offend her family. He ordered the food and wine to be served. This time, it was beef, mutton, and mushroom soup. He did not dare to serve her anything with bones. Honeysuckle ate at 6 tables in a row before she finally felt less hungry. Most of the ingredients in the palace were full of vitality. Even the beef and mutton were of the highest quality. 1 kilogram of meat contained the vitality of several kilograms of ordinary meat. Not to mention, there were often earthwheel-level beasts as ingredients. Outside it was completely different. However, Honeysuckle was very happy. She had eaten more delicacies than in the palace. After eating, she sat there and drank jar after jar of wine. After a few jars of wine, the shopkeeper could not sit still anymore. He had been waiting for her family to look for her, but after waiting for the whole afternoon, he saw that she still wanted to drink. He came up and asked, "Little girl, when will your family come to pick you up?" Honeysuckle shook her head. She was most afraid of being found by her father and mother. "May I know which family this young lady is from?" Honeysuckle continued to shake her head. "Then where is your family?" Honeysuckle still shook her head. To put it simply, she did not know anything. The shopkeeper did not know whether she didn't know or didn't want to answer. He guessed that it was the latter. Seeing this, he gritted his teeth and said, "Little girl, you better pay for this meal and the money for injuring Dr. Liu. The medical fee for injuring Dr. Liu is 2 taels of silver. You ate 24 dishes and drank 5 jars of potpourri, which is 4 taels of silver. That's a total of 6 taels of silver." Honeysuckle stared at him with her eyes wide open. "What money?" The shopkeeper also stared at her. The two of them stared at each other. The shopkeeper had a bad idea and asked, "Little girl, do you have money?" Honeysuckle looked at him, then at the hall that was once again full of people. She asked loudly, "Who wants to buy me a drink?" The restaurant suddenly became quiet. Everyone had noticed this earlier. After all, such a little girl drinking alone had aroused many people's curiosity. Hearing this, everyone was a little confused. What did this mean? On the contrary, the shopkeeper's face turned black. He asked in disbelief, "Little girl, do you have money?" Honeysuckle didn't look at him. Instead, she looked at the people in the restaurant with anticipation. Seeing that no one wanted to buy her a drink, Honeysuckle didn't know what was going on. Previously, when she sneaked out of Lawn City, the people in the restaurant all wanted to buy her a drink. With a blank look, Honeysuckle felt that something was wrong. She looked at the shopkeeper and asked, "What is money?" The shopkeeper almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The person in front of him didn't even know what money was. The surrounding people immediately burst into laughter. This little girl was indeed spoiled. She snuck out to have fun and didn't even know what money was. "Shopkeeper, how much money does she owe?" Someone suddenly shouted. This person was kind-hearted. He thought that if the money wasn't much, he would pay for it. This little girl looked pretty and interesting. 4 taels of silver. The shopkeeper gestured with his hand. That person immediately lost his voice. 6 taels of silver? How could it be so much? An ordinary person could only earn this much in half a year. "Shopkeeper, are you trying to cheat her of her money?" Someone immediately questioned. The shopkeeper had a bitter smile on his face. This person ate the whole afternoon. 5 jars of potpourri and 24 dishes. That's 4 taels of silver. She even injured Dr. Liu from the neighboring Daiji Hall. She has to pay 2 taels of silver. This time, everyone was speechless. Ate the whole afternoon? 24 dishes? 5 jars of wine. This little girl was so young. How could she eat so much? The shopkeeper was also speechless. This person in front of him was really speechless. He knew that she snuck out to have fun, and that her family wasn't ordinary. If she didn't have much money, it would have been fine. But 6 taels of silver was not a small amount. "Little girl, do you have anything valuable on you? You can mortgage this first and get your family to redeem it later." Without another word, Honeysuckle took the bag that she carried with her and poured it on the table. The shopkeeper originally had some expectations, but when he saw the things that were poured on the table, he was instantly speechless. What were these things? A few dried rats, a few dried birds, a small piece of bacon, a glass jar that looked like honey, a piece of sugar cane, a few fruits. Honeysuckle generously pointed at the things on the table. "Which one do you want?" These things were all his treasures. But since he had eaten her food, he would give her whatever she wanted. The shopkeeper was on the verge of crying. "I don't want any of them." At this time, a few people walked in and realized that the atmosphere in the restaurant wasn't right. They immediately followed the gaze of the crowd. When 2 of them saw Honeysuckle, their eyes instantly lit up. "Shopkeeper, what's going on?" A man with a wretched face and rat eyes shouted. The crowd in the restaurant was originally attracted by Honeysuckle's food. When they noticed the newcomers, their expressions all changed and they looked away. When the shopkeeper turned his head to look at the newcomers, His eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of disgust and fear. Not good. Why did these rats come? He hurriedly waved his hand. Nothing, nothing. I think you have something to say. If you have something to say, why don't you tell us? Which family is this little girl from? A young man with a frivolous smile placed his hand on the shopkeeper's shoulder. He looked at Honeysuckle as if he had seen a treasure. First, set a small goal. For example, remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1063. The world was complicated, and there were dark corners in every city. Even under the rule of the ancient race, such a situation would occur. In fact, they might even be out of the sight of the ancient race. This was because such a situation had never occurred in the Aboriginals. On one hand, Dayo had only existed for a short period of time. In the past, the Aboriginals lived in mountain villages. On the other hand, the Aboriginals were brave and good at fighting, so there was no soil for such a group to breed. If one dared to say that they were the gang leader of the Red Planet, that they were here to collect protection fees, or that they wanted to bully the innocent, they would be beaten to a pulp by a group of uncles and aunties with knives. The customs and history of the Aboriginals were destined to produce bandits, a profession with a bright future. If the imperial court issued a plundering certificate, the simple people carrying hoes in the village, or herding livestock in the wild would turn into the most ferocious bandits and rush into the surrounding countries. The Aboriginals didn't have the underworld, sex, or gutter rats at the bottom of society. However, it was completely different in the Yun Nation. In addition to the sex, there were also people outside the sex, forming another underworld. These two underworlds intersected with each other, but belonged to completely different existences. For example, the most powerful force in the vicinity of Wuxia City was the empty cicada house. In the eyes of the ordinary people, it was a huge force that was superior to them. In fact, it was considered an upper-middle sect in the Yun Nation. In Wuxia City, there were three other forces. They were the Snake Gang, the Boat Gang, and the Freedom Society. These three gangs were closely related to the ordinary people, but they were all different. Among them, the Snake Gang was mainly made up of snake catchers, the Boat Gang was made up of people who relied on the water for a living, and the Freedom Society was made up of gutter rats. They bullied the innocent, collected protection fees, stole chickens and dogs, and sold some innocent people to brothels. Almost all the despicable things in Wuxia City had something to do with the Freedom Society. The four people who came in were from the Freedom Society. The strongest among them hadn't reached the Manwil level, and was only slightly stronger than the ordinary people. Coupled with the background of the Freedom Society, it was enough for them to act like tyrants. The young man who patted the shopkeeper's shoulder was called Ping Dun. His nickname was Wild Dog, lecherous and sinister. Shopkeeper, what's the matter? Tell us. This little girl is so pretty. Which family is she from? We can't bear to see you make things difficult for her. Wild Dog laughed. As soon as he entered the room, he saw Hua as if he had seen a treasure. It wasn't that he liked Hua, but the leader of the Freedom Society liked this girl very much. Every once in a while, someone would send one to him, but no one else had seen her. He didn't know if she was dead or something. However, there were rumors that he liked to eat children's hearts and brains. If such an exquisite girl was sent to him, he might even be able to advance further. If he couldn't, he could he. If he could, then it he. If he couldn't, he wouldn't he world. If he of he and of he of him. Although this little girl seemed to be from a wealthy family, the Freedom Society was able to become one of the three major powers in Wuxia City. Naturally, they had their own strength. Their leader was an earthwill expert. The ordinary and of was in of the in and of. By even the shopkeeper had a conscience. He knew who the other party was and wanted to brush it off. However, Wild Dog's grip became stronger. His fingers seemed to be digging into the shopkeeper's shoulder. Wild Dog's expression became more and more dangerous. With an unbridled smile, he said, "We are kind, but the shopkeeper doesn't know how to appreciate our kindness." The shopkeeper broke out in a cold sweat. He had no choice but to tell Hua what had happened. After that, He felt sorry for Hua. Look at her attire. She's not from an ordinary family. An ordinary family can't give birth to such a child. Maybe the adults in the family will come looking for her. The shopkeeper added. I see. I'm a kind-hearted person. Let me help you. Wild Dog laughed and patted the shopkeeper's shoulder. Little girl, how should I address you? Did you sneak out or did you get separated from your family? It's not easy for the shopkeeper to deal with you eating and dashing. Do you want me to inform your family? Wild Dog was ready to ask about Hua's background and showed a kind smile. Hua didn't like the person in front of her. However, she also knew that she seemed to have done something wrong. She actually needed something called money to eat outside. Hence, when she heard the question, she subconsciously said, Hua. Wild Dog's smile became wider. This was not a name that a big family could give. Although the little girl was dressed well, from the name, even a squire wouldn't give his own child such a name. A nouveau riche who didn't study much. A merchant who came from a bumpkin background and earned some money. It must be her family's situation. Your family? Wild Dog's smile became even more kind. Hua shook her head. She wouldn't let her father and mother know that she was here. Wild Dog immediately imagined the scene of her and her father, who came from a bumpkin background, coming to Yujiang City and getting separated. These are brought by you? Wild Dog flipped through the things that Hua poured on the table. His smile became brighter. The dried rats and birds looked like they were for eating. Any family with a bit of status wouldn't let their children touch these things, let alone a girl. Let us accompany you to find your family, okay? As soon as Wild Dog said this, the surrounding people who had lowered their heads since they came in immediately showed a look of pity and worry. Brother, I think her family will be here soon. The shopkeeper had only said one sentence when he was slapped in the face. Shopkeeper, do you not want to keep this shop open, or do you not want to live? A fierce-looking young man whispered in his ear. Immediately, the shopkeeper was so scared that he didn't dare to speak. Why did you hit him? Hua glared at the young man angrily. She had a good impression of this shopkeeper. You're just a little girl. How can you have money on you? The shopkeeper is asking you for money. This is something you did wrong. If you did something wrong, you have to be punished. Wild Dog laughed lightly. Hua immediately felt that the person in front of her wasn't bad. She still felt that something was wrong. She mumbled, but I ate. You need to pay for food, but this money should be paid by your family. Shall I bring you to find your family? Wild Dog said. Hua shook her head. Then what should we do? You ate, but you don't have money to pay, and you're not willing to bring us to find your family. This is very difficult for me. Wild Dog was even happier in his heart, but his expression was very conflicted. Hua naturally didn't know what to do. Not only do you not have money, but you also have nowhere to go now, right? Hua nodded again. Wild Dog thought for a long time before saying, how about this? I'll be the middleman. You owe the shopkeeper money. You can pay when you find your family. Before that, I'll find a place for you to stay. Hua shook her head. She didn't want to find her father and mother. Wild Dog was slightly surprised. Then he changed his way of saying, how about this? I'll find you a job. I'll take care of your food and accommodation. You can return the money to the shopkeeper after you earn it. Hua didn't know what he meant by finding a job, but she nodded her head forcefully. The shopkeeper's face showed that he couldn't bear it. The Freedom Society often forced girls into prostitution. In his opinion, this was what the other party was planning. Even if this little girl was young, she would become an extremely beautiful girl after a few years, and could be sold for a good price. But he didn't dare to say it now. He only regretted it in his heart. If he knew this would happen, he would rather not have the 6 tails of silver. Then follow me. Wild Dog stood up with a smile and patted the shopkeeper's shoulder. He looked at him with a sinister gaze and said in an extremely happy voice, Shopkeeper, you don't have any objections to what I said, right? Hua kept her snacks and said to the shopkeeper very seriously, I'll give you the money. When they left the restaurant, the shopkeeper seemed to have lost all his strength and sat there paralyzed. The others were also silent. Although this wasn't the first time they heard about this, Seeing such a beautiful little girl fall into the hands of those rats made them feel suffocated. But what could they do? "I'll report it to the authorities," someone whispered. Immediately, someone pulled him back. If reporting to the authorities was useful, would the Freedom Society be so savage? "You'll be the first to die." Everyone became even more silent. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's house. Chapter 1064. On the street, in a restaurant not far away, a few men with thick limbs and ordinary clothes were drinking by the window. One of them looked out of the window and focused his gaze on a few people in the crowd. After a while he said, "It's those rats from the Freedom Society. I wonder where they tricked a little girl from." Another person looked out the window and said, "What a pity. It looks like he's from a rich family. These rats are getting bolder and bolder. Should we do something about it?" These people were from the Snake Gang, and the one who spoke was a small leader of the Snake Gang. He was at the initial stage of the man-will level and naturally didn't care about the people from the Freedom Society. "Forget it, don't be a busybody. Old Fu is getting more and more difficult to deal with these 2 years." Old Man Fu was the helper of the Freedom Association. Although the boat gang was slightly stronger than the Freedom Association, the strength of the boat gang's leader was a level lower than Old Man Fu. Naturally, he was unwilling to provoke the Freedom Association for other matters. On the roof of a building not far away, a man wearing leather armor sat on the roof. His eyes were like a hawk's as they fell on a few people in the crowd. Honeysuckle's confusion had disappeared. He looked at the crowd and the shops on both sides of the street with excitement. She didn't know where to go anyway, so she was tricked by a few simple words. If Rinpoche knew about this, he wondered what kind of expression he would have. Wild Dog asked Erhua a few questions from time to time, mainly to find out her background. But every time he asked about this, Erhua would shake her head. Seeing this, Wild Dog didn't ask any further. From the other party's name and the things he brought, it didn't seem like he had any background. He believed that he was good at reading people. Otherwise, he would have died in some corner long ago. As for what he was doing now, it wasn't the first time he was doing it. It was just that in the past he sold it to a brothel. This time he only needed to give it to the gang leader. In his heart, he was thinking about what kind of reward such a high-quality person could receive. Would it be gold or some precious cultivation method? No matter what, he would be able to enter the gang leader's eyes. This last point was just as important as the previous rewards. He brought Honeysuckle to where the Freedom Society was located. It was a courtyard with 3 entrances and 3 exits in the east of Yujiang City. The surrounding area was where the Freedom Society was located. "Wild Dog, who is this?" The 2 guards at the door were surprised to see To Blossom. Even though Honeysuckle was beautiful, she was still young. Not everyone was a lolicon. Sect leader will probably want to see her. Wild Dog's words were not subtle. The 2 of them immediately understood. Bringing Erhua to a courtyard, Wild Dog smiled warmly at her. "You can rest here first." Then she gave a look to the left and right, asking them to look at her. The courtyard wasn't big, and was even a little run down. It was used to look after children like 2 flowers. There were still 2 guards in the courtyard. Wild Dog smiled and asked someone to send Erhua in before he left. Doubtlessly, Erhua did not know any of this. When he was sent into the house, he felt that it was very small and could not be compared to the palace. However, she didn't care. Instead, she was thinking about where to go tomorrow. "You want to see the gang leader? The gang leader is cultivating and has no time to see you." Wild Dog, who was eager to take credit, was rebuffed. "When will the gang leader come out?" "I found some good stuff. Sect Master will definitely like it." "Go look for Deacon Lin." Wild Dog didn't even have the chance to see the leader of the Freedom Association. Although he could flaunt his prowess in front of ordinary people, he was only at the middle and lower levels of the easygoing society. At most, he was a small leader with only a few people under his command. Therefore, he took it for granted. If it wasn't for the good stuff, he wouldn't have been able to see Deacon Lin whenever he wanted to. After a while, he met with Deacon Lin and only received a sentence, "Let's talk tomorrow." Not long after, Erhua heard a faint sobbing sound that seemed to be nearby. Curious and excited, she couldn't fall asleep, so she pushed the door open and went out. There was no one in the courtyard who sent her here. Instead, there were two men in black. When they saw her push the door open, their faces immediately turned cold. Who allowed you to come out? Get lost. Erhua didn't react and pointed at herself doubtfully. One of the men, who was about 40 years old and had a scar on his face, walked toward her with a grin and said, "Of course it was you. Who else could it be? Little bastard, since you are here, you better stay here obediently." Although Erhua was young and insensible, she could understand what was being said and could tell the attitude of others. When she saw the grin on this man's face, she immediately raised her eyebrows and felt very angry. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. If Renbaqian saw her expression, he would definitely find it very familiar. The Empress always had this expression when she wanted to kill someone. With a grin on his face, the man reached out to grab Erhua's head and pushed her forward. Seeing that the man was going to grab her head, Erhua became even more furious and rammed her head into him without thinking. Bang! The man flew backward and spat out a mouthful of blood in mid-air. The other man was shocked. The people who were sent to this courtyard were all children, and he didn't expect that there would be an expert among them. Although he didn't see clearly, he knew that the person who sent his companion flying and spat out blood definitely wasn't an ordinary person. "Little bastard, you are courting death." The other man cursed, drew a knife from his waist, and slashed at Erhua. Seeing the knife, Erhua was a little afraid. The other man was very fierce and had a weapon. She didn't have any combat experience. Fortunately, the other party was very slow. Erhua took 2 steps back and dodged a few consecutive slashes from the other party. She didn't know what to do. Then she remembered that she had a sword. In the next second, the other party was sent flying by the 4-meter-long sword that suddenly appeared in Erhua's hand, and his body was distorted in the air. Half of the wall was also sent flying. When Erhua ran out of the house, 7 or 8 people had already rushed into the courtyard. When they saw the 2 people lying in the courtyard, they all cursed and rushed over with their knives drawn. Erhua felt very wronged. These people all wanted to beat her up. She felt that she was being bullied. However, she had just sent a person flying with a sword, and this gave her some confidence. The small wooden sword in her hand grew bigger, bigger, and bigger. A 4-meter-long wooden sword that looked like a wooden plank appeared in her hand, and it directly stunned the people who were rushing over. Erhua slapped horizontally again and again, and again. It was as if she was slapping flies. The people who were rushing over were all sent flying back into the wall, or out of the courtyard. More people jumped onto the wall and looked at the little girl in the courtyard, who was waving the wooden plank with her eyes closed. They were all dumbfounded. "Who are you?" Deacon Lin, who rushed over, appeared in front of the door. He stared at the small figure in the courtyard, and was a little puzzled. How old was this child? How could she be so strong? No matter how he looked at it, Erhua was just an ordinary person. The only thing was that she was terrifyingly strong. Under the fierce gazes of so many people, Erhua's face was full of grievance. She finally remembered who she was. "I'm your father." Deacon Lin was so angry that smoke was coming out of his head. He stared coldly at Erhua and ordered, "Take her down." On the roof of a house not far away, a man wearing leather armor was holding a telescope and looking at what was happening here. He was originally prepared to make a move, but when he saw the wooden plank in Erhua's hand, he felt that he could wait a little longer. As expected of the princess, as expected of His Majesty's daughter, although she is young, she has the demeanor of His Majesty. The man praised with a smile on his face. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1065. Although the words, "I'm your father," were spoken in a soft and adorable voice with a tinge of grievance and doubt, it still made Deacon Lin's face turn green. Although Deacon Lin was considered a big shot in Yujiang City, he was only at the bottom of the hierarchy in the Yun nation. However, his past had distorted his self-esteem. Therefore, at his command, Dozens of people on and off the walls pounced on Erhua. The scene was spectacular. However, under the force of the wooden door in Erhua's hand, they were sent flying one by one. However, even though Erhua waved the wooden door like a fan to fend off the flies that pounced on her, her movements revealed flaws. A person standing in the distance approached her like a shadow. His bony hand reached out to grab Honeysuckle's face. Honeysuckle was startled by the sudden appearance of the person. He could even smell the fishy smell coming from the other person's fingers. He immediately jumped back and swung his wooden sword with all his might at the person without thinking. This gave the others a shock as well. Her speed was twice as fast as before. The silhouette who had suddenly appeared thought that the other party was still a child who was just a little stronger. He wanted to take her down with one move, but the wooden sword that had suddenly doubled in speed caused panic to appear in his eyes. His body only managed to dodge halfway before he was directly slapped to the ground. Smack! 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 Erhua seemed to be startled, and kept slapping the wooden door in her hand. When she stopped, there was only a pile of flesh and blood left on the ground. Seeing the puddle of things on the ground, Two Blossom burst into tears. This was the first time she had killed someone in her life. Not to mention killing someone, even those rats and birds were given to her by Zhu Hua. Erhua's eyes were red, and tears were dripping down her cheeks. Her mind was completely blank as she looked at the pile of flesh that originally belonged to a person. At this moment, a figure suddenly floated in front of her and kicked her head, sending her flying 7 or 8 meters away. The person who kicked her was Deacon Lin. Deacon Lin was very confident that even an advanced man-will expert's head would be smashed by this kick. One had to know that his boots and legs were made of iron. However, something unbelievable happened. Honeysuckle rolled on the ground, turned around, and ran away while crying. Her cries were extremely pitiful. Anyone who saw it would feel sad, and anyone who heard it would shed tears. However, the man on the rooftop had no intention of making a move. Instead, he was a little disappointed. The order from above was to let the little princess suffer a little and hone her skills. He agreed with this point. How could an aboriginal child be pampered like those foreigners? Furthermore, this was a princess. She was born with the strength of an earth wheel expert and bore the hopes of all the aboriginals. This Deacon Lin was merely at the pinnacle of the man-will level, and was merely at the threshold of the earth wheel level. With the little princess's strength as an earth wheel expert at birth, she could slap him to death with a single slap. He could only watch as the wooden sword in Honeysuckle's hand shrank to the size of a palm. Honeysuckle turned around and ran away while crying. Although Deacon Lin wanted to chase after him, he realized that the other party's speed was faster than he expected. This caused him to be slightly shocked. After all, the other party was only a 7 or 8-year-old child. Not only did he not die from his kick, but he also had such a fast speed. With such strength at such a young age, he definitely didn't come from a humble background like that bastard had said. Furthermore, the door in his hand that could change its size was definitely a treasure. If he was still looking down on her just now, Deacon Lin now understood and thought, I'm in trouble. Now he only had two choices. The first was to let her run away and bring her family to take revenge. Although she didn't seem to have suffered much, he had given her a kick. He didn't know how serious her injuries were. According to Deacon Lin's conjecture, even if she was fine now, she definitely wouldn't be able to recover. Her family definitely wouldn't let him off. The second choice was to kill her. Then he would kill everyone who knew about this and refused to admit to it. The second choice was definitely more dangerous than the first, but he could only choose the second one. Otherwise, if the other party came looking for him and was stronger than the Freedom Sect, the sect leader would definitely hand him over. Of course, there was still a third choice, which was to give up everything and leave right now. However, he didn't even know who the other party was or what their background was. If he gave up everything in Yujiang City and fled in a sorry state, no normal person would do such a thing. Although it sounded like a long time, in reality, it was only a few seconds. These thoughts flashed through Deacon Lin's mind, and he directly chased after her. From his point of view, although that little brat wasn't slow and had great strength, he didn't have any tricks up his sleeves. He was definitely not a match for him. Honeysuckle cried as she ran out. She was mainly frightened. First, she had killed someone, and second, she had been kicked in the head. She had never experienced anything like this before. Honeysuckle, who was only 3 years old, had her mind completely blank. She ran all over the roof. Then, she ran all the way out of the city before rubbing her red eyes and wiping her snot on her clothes. Looking at the darkness around her, she didn't know where to go. She randomly found a direction and ran, but her speed slowed down. In just a few minutes, Deacon Lin caught up to her. He didn't say anything and directly pounced on her head, kicking Honeysuckle's head. Honeysuckle was kicked away again. While she was still in the air, Deacon Lin kicked her again and again, hitting her 37 times in a row. However, if there was a health bar above Honeysuckle's head, it would only be a few strands. Then Deacon Lin kicked another door panel. Honeysuckle was also going crazy. Although she was frightened at first, after being kicked dozens of times in a row, all that was left in her mind was anger. After landing on the ground, she rolled over and waved the door panel at Deacon Lin. Deacon Lin wasn't wrong. Honeysuckle really didn't know any tricks. However, he was wrong about one thing. The door panel in Honeysuckle's hand was too big and strong. When it was only facing him, even he couldn't find a chance to dodge it. However, Honeysuckle's speed was too fast. She chased after him, one door panel after another, chasing him and slapping him. Honeysuckle couldn't hit him, but he couldn't do anything to her either. The two of them were in a stalemate for 15 minutes. The anger in Honeysuckle's heart subsided, and her childish nature came out. She wanted to run again. However, Deacon Lin kept following her. Honeysuckle turned around again, took the door panel, and slapped everywhere. The two of them fought for a long time, and no one knew where they ran to. Seeing that the sky was turning bright, Deacon Lin also began to retreat. At the beginning, the two of them were fighting, and he wanted to exhaust the little girl's strength. However, after a night, the other party was still full of energy, but he had almost used up all his strength. Just now he almost didn't dodge and was hit by the other party. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but the little girl's movements seemed to be faster. And it seemed to be a little more methodical. Just when Deacon Lin was hesitating, Honeysuckle suddenly turned around and threw the door panel at him. At this time, Deacon Lin's speed was also a lot slower, and he was almost hit by the door panel. He was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He made up his mind that he couldn't fight anymore. He would go back to pack his things and leave Yujiang City. However, when he dodged the door panel, he suddenly found that the little figure had taken this opportunity to crash into his arms. Small fists hammered your chest. In an instant, Deacon Lin didn't know how many small fists he had suffered. First, set a small goal such as 1 second. Chapter 1066. In the past, Renbachian had a unique skill called the Tortoise Fist. At this moment, Honeysuckle was self-taught and automatically learned the first skill. She rushed into Deacon Lin's arms and punched him. Deacon Lin felt as if he had been hit by countless hammers. His chest bones and internal organs were almost all broken into pieces, and his blood and internal organ fragments spurted out. He flew into the air and stopped breathing. His eyes were wide open and filled with indignation. When he came out, he didn't expect to be killed by a little girl. Honeysuckle punched his chest and was stunned for a long time. She went forward to look at the lifeless Deacon, and her eyes turned red again. However, she didn't cry this time. She had experienced things that she had never experienced before, especially after being hunted for an entire night. Although her understanding of the world hadn't improved much, her temperament had changed a lot. From this point of view, Renbachian's plan to train her was a success. Honeysuckle was very hungry. She had never been so hungry since she was young, and her stomach felt like it was overturned. However, she had to find her small wooden sword first. After this night, she suddenly understood that only that toy could protect her in the outside world. After spending some time finding the wooden sword, Honeysuckle wanted to cry again. This time, it was because she was hungry. Her stomach was even hungrier. Furthermore, she missed her father and mother. However, solving the problem of her stomach was more important. Although her snacks were thrown away, Honeysuckle still had a certain amount of wilderness survival experience. She had honed her skills in the garden of the palace. Butterflies? Eat them. Flowers? Eat them. Aphids? Eat them. Cicadas? Honeysuckle. Honeysuckle was in a small forest. She walked in circles, grabbing insects, flowers, and a pitiful number of berries and stuffing them into her mouth. After spending half a day, she finally felt less hungry. Honeysuckle then followed the original path. She wanted to return to the palace. She had to find the previous city before she could take the train back. The outside world wasn't as fun as she thought it would be. Not everyone was as friendly as the people at Shanhui House. However, she didn't know how far she had run last night, but she soon got lost. Honeysuckle was at a loss as she looked at her unfamiliar surroundings. After standing there in a daze for a long time, he could only choose a random direction to walk in. Behind her, the man who had watched her being chased and beaten for an entire night landed near Deacon Lin's body. With a cold smile on his face, he crushed Deacon Lin's head before continuing to follow behind her. Although the little princess was still very young, he realized that the little princess had improved a lot in one night. In the beginning, he did not have the strength to fight back, and only knew how to swing the door around randomly. Later on, he gained some skill and even deliberately revealed flaws. It was a world of difference. The growth of the little princess excited him. After all, the little princess's starting point was already so high. Coupled with her speed of growth, he believed that the little princess would become a strong person not weaker than His Majesty in the future. Witnessing the growth of such a powerhouse, even if it was just a small part of it, was enough to make him proud when the little princess grew up. The wild dog curled up into a ball. At this moment, he and the other three were all tied together, with bruises all over their faces. "Brother Go, tell me, how could you have made such a mistake?" The ugly man complained gloomily. Yesterday, when the few of them sent the little girl over, they went back to discuss what rewards they could get and imagine the future. They did not expect to be caught in the middle of the night. First they were beaten and kicked. Then they told everything about the little girl and were thrown here. It was said that they would wait for Deacon Lin to come back before dealing with them. Wild Dog's face was gloomy. His eyes were filled with madness and viciousness. In his heart, he was thinking about how to take revenge on those people last night. He also wanted to take revenge on the restaurant owner. That little girl was actually a master. Why didn't anyone tell him? But before that, he still had to lie down like a dog and beg Deacon Lin to let him go. At most, we made a mistake this time. When Deacon Lin comes back, he will at most punish us. It's no big deal. Although Wild Dog hated the man who was blaming him, he still had to comfort them. It's not the first time we did this. If we are punished too heavily, what would others think? Who would dare to risk their lives? Brother Go is right, another man said with a face full of bad luck. Now they just had to wait for Deacon Lin to come back. However, from midnight to the afternoon, there was still no movement from Deacon Lin. Deacon Lin won't be in trouble, right? The few of them became more and more uneasy. The ugly man kept talking. Less nonsense. What can happen to Deacon Lin? There are not many people in Yujiang City who can beat him. Wild Dog scolded. It's been so long. Why hasn't he come back yet? He must have been delayed by something. The few of them could only wait. However, they did not see Deacon Lin. Instead, they saw the gang leader, Fu Zizai, who came out of seclusion early. The few of them were directly thrown to the ground. Sitting in the seat of honor was old Fu, who had just come out of seclusion. He was more than 50 years old and had dark skin. He held a cup of tea in one hand and looked at the few of them with an expressionless face. Tell me what happened. The few of them were startled and hurriedly told the story again. Gang leader, that little girl is very pretty. I, Wild Dog, have never seen such a pretty girl in my life. I asked her and she is actually called Hua. Listen. Is this the name of a child from a rich family? I wanted to give her to you as a show of filial piety as a maidservant. Who knows what happened after that? Until now, I still don't know what happened. Wild Dog tried to express his loyalty and extricate himself from the matter. This way, The gang leader would let him go on account of his hard work even if he didn't make any contributions. Otherwise, everyone in Yujiang City knew how vicious and merciless the gang leader was. A little girl with no background. You can't even take down a few dozen people? Deacon Lin has been chasing you for half a day and still hasn't returned? There's no point in keeping your eyeballs. Old Fu's words were filled with the stench of blood, causing the few of them to be scared out of their wits. Gang leader, we really don't know anything. We are just loyally working for the gang. Wild Dog and the few of them hurriedly begged for mercy. Old Fu looked at the few of them and revealed a cold smile. Just when he was about to speak, he suddenly heard screams and messy footsteps coming from outside. The door was wide open, and the guards outside the courtyard could be seen flying in. Old Fu's face sank. Who was so daring to directly attack the Freedom Society? Following that, his pupil shrank. It was a group of strong men that looked like bears. The Aboriginals. Why are the Aboriginals here? Old Fu's heart trembled as he stood up in a panic. Among the group of Aboriginals who came in from outside, the leader was a burly man in a purple robe. He was about 20 years old and was bald. Many Aboriginals were bald, but this man didn't even have eyebrows. He had a sneer on his face. Beside him was a young girl who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old, and was still yawning. Following behind her were 20 burly men who were fully armored and armed with long swords. The weakest among them was an earth will expert. Old Fu broke out in a cold sweat and trembled all over. He quickly ran out with a fawning smile and asked, "May I know who has come?" The person who came didn't even look at him, walked inside, and sat in the main seat. With an incomprehensible smile on his face he said, "Not bad, you guys are not bad. Sir, I'm Fu Zizai. How should I address you? What instructions do you have?" Old Fu bowed and spoke in a flattering tone that Wild Dog had never heard before. However, Wild Dog could understand that even the warlord didn't dare to be disrespectful to the Aboriginals. "My surname is Run Rinpochian," Rinpochian said faintly. "So it's Sir Rin." Old Fu was halfway through his sentence when his eyes widened, and he looked terrified. "Your Highness." Rinpochian continued to speak in a very kind tone. "You guys have done well, really well." Before everyone could understand the meaning behind Rinpochian's words, his next sentence made them tremble all over. "My daughter is really indebted to you guys for your hospitality. The daughter of the prince and the empress? The daughter of the prince and the empress? Princess?" The few of them felt as if they were struck by lightning. Old Fu almost collapsed to the ground. Holding on to his last bit of hope, he asked in a panicked tone, "How can lowly people like us meet the princess? Why haven't we seen her before? Weren't you guys still treating her with great hospitality last night?" Rinpochian glanced at them and spoke in a voice that was as cold as ice. "Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, booksellers." Chapter 1067. Rinpochian's words scared them out of their wits. In Wild Dog's heart, their powerful and ferocious gang leader was trembling like a sieve. Guangsha Literature Network. Your Highness, I just came out of seclusion. I don't know anything. It was these people who acted on their own and offended the princess. I really don't know anything. Old Fu's face was full of panic and despair. "It doesn't matter." Rinpochian waved his hand. His simple and calm words gave Old Fu a glimmer of hope. However, the next sentence sent him into an icy abyss. "Money, power, and women. You have enjoyed all that you should have, so you have no regrets in death. When I came here, I asked someone to inquire about what you have done over the years, so you won't die unjustly," Rinpochian said in an extremely calm voice. He didn't even look at the people below him. Bean-sized beads of sweat rolled down Old Fu's forehead, his lips turned pale, and his eyes were filled with fear and unwillingness. However, in the next second, Old Fu suddenly jumped up, broke through the roof, and fled into the distance. He didn't dare to attack Rinpochian, and only hoped that he could escape. It wasn't impossible. Although Rinpochian had brought Earthwill experts with him, it was common knowledge that the Aboriginals were very strong, but their explosive speed was relatively average and their body techniques were even worse. If it were just these guards, it wasn't impossible for him to escape. However, Renbaqian didn't only bring the winged cavalry. Renbaqian got up and rubbed the head of Lin Xiaola, who was dozing off, and said, "Get up and get to work. Bring him back alive. I will add a chicken drumstick for you tonight." She was the cheapest spirit will expert. Lin Xiaola slapped Renbaqian's hand away and leaped out of the roof that old Fu had smashed open. Within a few minutes, she returned with a black-faced and trembling old Fu. "Your Highness, kill them all?" The guards who came with her showed a sinister smile. "Hang them. Set up a row of poles in front of the door and hang them all." Renbaqian's words decided the fate of everyone in the Freedom Club. The people of the Yun Nation wouldn't be dissatisfied with killing a gang like the Freedom Society that did all kinds of bad things. Instead, they would be grateful. If they were all hanged outside, it would serve as a reminder to everyone. The Imperial Court of Dayo wasn't like the Imperial Court of the Yun Nation, which couldn't control the local government, and allowed some thieves to collude with the officials to commit crimes. When City Lord Yu Jiang rushed over with a head full of sweat, he saw corpses hanging on poles, fluttering like banners. There were over 100 of them. Fu Zizai is also hanging on it. Other than Lin Xian of the Zizai Society, everyone else is there, a scholar said to him in a low voice. When the soldiers accompanying City Lord Yu Jiang saw this scene, there was a slight commotion. "Everyone be quiet and wait here obediently." City Lord Yu Jiang turned around and gave the order. He tidied up his clothes and hurriedly entered the Freedom Society's lair. He couldn't help wondering why Zhao Prince Consort was here. He was almost scared to death when he heard that Zhao Prince Consort had come here and was heading straight for the Freedom Association. When he saw the corpses hanging outside, he knew that the Freedom Society must have somehow offended this top figure. Otherwise, a small power like the Freedom Society wouldn't have caught his eye. The question was, how did these rats provoke him? A moment later, Renbaqian saw him. "Yu Qingdong pays his respects to your highness." He glanced at him and said faintly, "Your Yujiang city is really a place that harbors evil. Don't tell me that you don't know. I'm guilty of dereliction of duty." Yu Qingdong didn't dare to defend himself. He lowered his head and didn't dare to wipe the sweat from his eyes. Renbaqian was just giving him a warning. He knew that these rats could be found everywhere. Once a batch was killed, another batch would pop up. Besides, other than the Freedom Society, everything else in Yujiang City was in order. Yu Qingdong was considered a talent, so he naturally wouldn't make things too difficult for him. "It's good that you know that you are guilty. If there is a next time, I will only see your head." Yes, I know my mistake," Yu Qingdong repeatedly responded, even though he didn't know what Renbaqian meant by, "There is a next time." Renbaqian asked his men to bring a few boys and girls between the ages of 4 and 10. Everyone was full of fear. Renbaqian looked at them and couldn't help but give them another warning. This Freedom Society abducts and deceives children just to dig out their hearts to drink. Such people can actually live until now. Yu Qingdong's forehead was sweating again. "It's my dereliction of duty. You even dare to have designs on the princess, huh?" Renbaqian sneered with a murderous look. Yu Qingdong almost collapsed to the ground when he heard this. The princess came to Yujiang City. The Freedom Society dared to have designs on the princess? If I knew that you were so eager to die, I would have sent you to the netherworld. I will spare your life this time. Send these children to settle down and find their families. Renbaqian waved his hand. Yu Qingdong made arrangements for these children and held a banquet at the warlord's residence. This time, Renbaqian didn't refuse. After giving them a warning, he met with the local officials at an appropriate time to let them do their work with peace of mind. Although he came for Erhua, he also had to represent the court's attitude. The next evening, Renbaqian stood on the second floor of a restaurant on Guan Road and looked down. Erhua was right below. At this time, Erhua was dirty, had stains on her small face, and her clothes were a little torn. Most importantly, she was surrounded by a few young beggars. Renbaqian didn't expect that in one night, Erhua would actually recruit a few young beggars and become the chief of the beggar sect. It was said that in a temple outside the city last night, Erhua snatched the sleeping quarters of a few young beggars and showed off her skills. She was immediately regarded as a celestial being by those young beggars. In the alley diagonally opposite the restaurant, 2 flower and 5 little beggars were facing 3 or 4 adults. Both sides were talking about something, and it seemed like they were fighting over territory. Among beggars, this kind of situation was very common. Erhua didn't know what the other party said, but she seemed very angry. She then rushed over and punched and kicked those beggars to the ground before leaving the alley with a few cheering young beggars. The princess has finally learned to talk with her fists. The imperial guards standing beside Renbachian were so touched that tears almost fell from their eyes when they saw this scene. These imperial guards had watched Erhua grow up. In the past, she only used her fists to cause trouble, but now, she had finally learned to fight for territory with her fists. Renbachian's mouth twitched. Was this something to be happy about? However, looking at Erhua's dirty appearance, Renbachian felt a little suffocated and distressed. Although Erhua often rolled on the ground and dug tunnels in the palace, making her look like a muddy ball, that was completely different from what she was doing now. Renbachian really wanted to rush down now, give Erhua a good bath, and let her have a good meal. He thought that she hadn't eaten well for the past few days. However, he suppressed this urge because he wanted to see more. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.